What if everything you thought you knew about ancient history was missing its most incredible chapter? We often picture our ancestors as primitive people with simple tools, struggling to survive in a harsh world. But what if that picture is fundamentally incomplete? What if scattered throughout our past are clear signs of engineering genius so advanced that even today, with all our technology and scientific understanding, we struggle to explain how they were accomplished? This isn't a fantasy or a scene from a science fiction movie. It is the compelling, tangible reality of our shared human heritage, a reality we are only just beginning to piece together from the fragments left behind. These aren't just old ruins or interesting artifacts. They are sophisticated blueprints, intricate plans and designs that speak of a deep, sophisticated knowledge that, for reasons lost to time, vanished from the world. Today, we are embarking on a remarkable journey to uncover 31 of these lost blueprints. We will travel across continents and millennia, exploring the hidden engineering marvels of civilizations that time itself has nearly erased. Each of these designs represents a puzzle, a challenge to our modern assumptions about technological progress. How did ancient builders create structures that withstand earthquakes better than our own modern buildings? How did they devise complex astronomical calculators without the aid of computers? How did they develop materials with properties we are only now learning to replicate? These are not idle questions. The answers have the power to shake the very foundations of our historical narrative, suggesting that the path of human innovation is not a straight, upward line, but one with peaks of achievement that were later forgotten, waiting in the dust to be rediscovered. From the mysterious megaliths that dot the globe to what appear to be impossible irrigation systems thriving in the desert, each of these lost blueprints tells a powerful story. They are stories of human ingenuity, of cultures that looked at the world around them and found brilliant, elegant solutions to the most complex problems. As we explore these enigmatic artifacts and the profound implications they hold for our own world, you will find yourself questioning everything. You will see the ancient world not as a dim prelude to our modern era, but as a place of dazzling light, filled with masters of their craft whose secrets we are only just beginning to grasp. So prepare to have your perspective shifted, because we are about to dive deep into the forgotten engineering that could quite literally help reshape our future. It was the spring of 1901 when a crew of Greek sponge divers, seeking refuge from a sudden storm, anchored near the tiny, rocky island of Antikythera. What began as a desperate search for shelter would soon become one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of all time. Beneath the waves, they encountered the ghostly wreck of an ancient Roman cargo ship, its wooden hull long since devoured by time, but its treasure trove of marble and bronze statues preserved in the deep. Amidst the scattered remnants of a lost world, one object seemed unremarkable at first, a heavily corroded, lumpy piece of bronze about the size of a large book caked in centuries of marine growth. It was so encrusted and fragile that it nearly crumbled in their hands. Little could they have known that this seemingly worthless chunk of metal would eventually be recognized as the most stunningly complex object to survive from classical antiquity. When conservators at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens began the careful process of cleaning it, the lump split apart, revealing the unmistakable glint of precisely machined bronze gears. This was not a statue or a simple tool. It was a machine, dated to around 100 years before the Common Era. The Antikythera Mechanism, as it came to be known, consisted of an intricate clockwork of at least 30 interlocking meshed gears, all housed within a wooden case covered with inscribed bronze plates. For decades, it baffled every expert who examined it. The prevailing view of ancient Greek technology simply had no room for such a device. It was an impossible artifact, a ghost from a past that shouldn't exist. The true nature of this incredible machine began to reveal itself in the 1950s and 60s, thanks to the painstaking work of science historian Derek de Solla Price. Using early X-ray and gamma-ray imaging to peer inside the calcified blocks, Price spent decades meticulously mapping the gear trains. What he uncovered was nothing short of a cosmic calculator. The mechanism was an astronomical computer of breathtaking sophistication. By turning a hand crank on the side, an operator could advance the gears to display the positions of the Sun, the Moon, and likely the 5 known planets against the backdrop of the Egyptian zodiac. It could predict lunar and solar eclipses with remarkable accuracy, and it even modeled the Moon's irregular orbit, a subtle effect known as lunar anomaly, using a clever pin and slot gear system that mimicked the Moon's variable speed. Perhaps the most shocking revelation was the presence of a differential gear. This is not a simple cog. It's an assembly that calculates a difference between 2 rotational inputs to produce a single output. In the modern world, we use differential gears in the axles of our cars, allowing the wheels to rotate at different speeds while turning a corner. In the Antikythera Mechanism, this complex gear train was used to subtract the Moon's motion from the Sun's, a calculation crucial for its astronomical predictions. This technology was so advanced that historians of machinery were certain it had been invented in the 16th century. To find it in a device from the 1st century before the Common Era was like finding a jet engine in the workshop of Leonardo da Vinci. It completely rewrites our understanding of the technological ceiling of the ancient world. The existence of this mechanism forces us to confront a profound and unsettling question. How did a civilization working with simple hand tools without standardized measurement or industrial manufacturing achieve such a feat of micro-engineering? The gears were cut from single sheets of bronze, their teeth hand-filed with a precision that would be challenging to replicate even today without modern equipment. This was not the work of a lone, isolated genius tinkering in a shed. The knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and precision mechanics required to design and build such a device points to an entire school of engineering, a tradition of high technology that has vanished almost without a trace from the historical record. We have literary references to similar devices built by Archimedes and others, suggesting the Antikythera Mechanism was not a one-off miracle, but perhaps a specimen of a known, if exceedingly rare, class of scientific instrument. This single, salvaged artifact shatters the comforting, linear narrative of technological progress. It stands as a silent, bronze-cogged testament to a peak of engineering knowledge that was reached and then lost for over a millennium. Its very presence in that shipwreck, a piece of high technology being transported across the Mediterranean, hints at a hidden lineage of advanced mechanical science that flourished and then was extinguished by the fires of war, the collapse of empires, and the long, slow forgetting of the Dark Ages. The Antikythera Mechanism is more than just the world's first analog computer. It is a ghost map of a road not taken, a blueprint for a different future that the ancient world almost grasped, only to see it sink beneath the waves, waiting centuries for us to find it again and begin to comprehend what was lost. While the Antikythera Mechanism reveals a lost world of precision mechanics, another discovery from the ancient Middle East suggests an entirely different kind of knowledge, one that crackled with electrical potential. In 1936, workers excavating for a railway near Baghdad stumbled upon a very peculiar set of artifacts. They weren't grand statues or golden treasures, but rather a collection of simple, unassuming clay jars, each about the size of a man's fist. Inside one of these jars, archaeologists found a sealed copper cylinder, and within that cylinder, an iron rod, all held firmly in place by an asphalt plug. The asphalt stopper showed clear signs of having been pierced, likely by some kind of wire or connector. To the untrained eye, it was just a curious arrangement of mundane materials. But to anyone with a basic understanding of chemistry, this simple assembly was a revelation. It was, in essence, a primitive galvanic cell, a battery. Dating from the Parthian period, somewhere between 250 years before the Common Era and 224 years after it, this object, along with several others found nearby, predates Alessandro Volta's official invention of the battery in the year 1800 by nearly 2 millennia. The science behind it is elegantly simple. If the jar were filled with an acidic or alkaline liquid, such as vinegar or grape juice, the electrolyte would have initiated a chemical reaction between the iron rod and the copper cylinder. Electrons would flow from the iron anode to the copper cathode, creating a potential difference or voltage between the two metals. In short, this clay pot would have generated a low-level but consistent electrical current. Replicas built by researchers have confirmed this, producing around 1 to 2 volts of electricity, enough for a faint but tangible tingle. The great debate, of course, centers not on whether it could produce electricity, but on what the Parthians, or perhaps the later Sasanians who also occupied the region, intended to do with it. One of the most compelling theories involves electroplating. The art of gilding objects with a thin layer of gold was well known in the ancient world, typically achieved using mercury in a dangerous and difficult process. But electricity offers a much cleaner and more controlled method. An object to be plated is connected to the negative terminal of a battery and submerged in a solution containing dissolved gold particles. The positive terminal is connected to a piece of gold, and the electrical current slowly draws the gold ions from the solution, depositing them in a uniform layer onto the object. Several ancient artifacts, particularly from Mesopotamia, display remarkably fine and even gold plating that has long puzzled experts. Could the Baghdad Battery have been the secret tool of ancient artisans, used to electroplate small objects like jewelry or religious icons? It's a tantalizing possibility. Other theories venture into more speculative yet fascinating territory. Ancient Egyptian and Greek texts sometimes describe medical treatments involving electric fish to numb pain. Could a controlled electrical current from a battery have been used for a similar analgesic or therapeutic purpose? Another hypothesis suggests a religious or mystical application. Imagine a priest in a dim temple connecting a series of these batteries to a small metal statue. A worshipper, instructed to complete the circuit by touching the idol, would feel a mysterious, vibrating shock, a direct physical sensation of divine power. In a world where the nature of electricity was unknown, such an experience would be indistinguishable from magic, a powerful tool for inspiring awe and devotion. While we may never know its true purpose with absolute certainty, the very existence of the Baghdad Battery forces a dramatic re-evaluation of ancient technological sophistication. This isn't merely about one odd jar. It represents a conceptual leap, a blueprint for controlling a fundamental force of nature that, according to conventional history, remained untamed for another 1800 years. It forces us to ask an unsettling question. Was this a singular, isolated experiment, or was it part of a broader, now lost, understanding of electrical principles? Could there have been ancient inventors who connected multiple batteries in series to create higher voltages? Did they experiment with different electrolytes or electrode materials to increase the current? The archaeological record is silent on these questions, but the battery itself stands as quiet, stubborn proof that the knowledge was there. It's a single piece of a puzzle whose full picture has been lost to time, hinting that our ancestors may have been playing with sparks of power long before we ever gave them credit. Now, let's shift our focus from the subtle currents of electricity to the monumental, enduring strength of stone and mortar. While the Baghdad Battery hints at a spark of forgotten knowledge, the legacy of Roman concrete represents a foundational power that literally held an empire together, and in some remarkable cases, continues to do so to this very day. Picture the ancient harbor at Caesarea Maritima, a massive artificial port constructed on the coast of modern-day Israel. For over 2,000 years, its breakwaters have been relentlessly pounded by the salty, corrosive waves of the Mediterranean Sea. If you were to visit that site now, you would see a haunting underwater landscape of concrete blocks, still largely intact, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries but their structural core defiantly unbroken. Now contrast this with a modern concrete pier or seawall. Even with all our advanced chemistry and steel reinforcement, such structures often show significant deterioration within just 50 years, succumbing to the relentless chemical attack of seawater. This stark difference isn't a matter of luck. It's the result of a technological secret that Roman engineers mastered, a secret we are only now, in the 21st century, beginning to fully unravel. For generations, historians and engineers simply assumed the incredible durability of Roman concrete was a happy accident, or perhaps the result of a particularly pure limestone quarry that had long since been exhausted. The recipe was known to be simple in its ingredients, a mix of lime, volcanic ash, and aggregate, often using seawater directly in the mixing process. Yet modern attempts to recreate it always fell short. Our own modern concrete is designed to be inert and stable. We want a predictable, unchanging material. But Roman concrete was designed to be something else entirely, a living, reacting material. The breakthrough in understanding came when an international team of researchers began using advanced spectroscopic and microscopic techniques to analyze core samples taken from these ancient marine structures. What they discovered deep within the Roman concrete was a crystalline structure that shouldn't have been there. Tiny, plate-like crystals of a rare mineral called aluminous tobermorite were woven throughout the fabric of the concrete. This is where the Roman genius becomes truly apparent. Tobermorite is a mineral that typically forms in nature under the intense heat and pressure of volcanic activity. It is not something you expect to find calmly crystallizing at the bottom of the sea. The Romans, however, had engineered the perfect conditions for its formation. Their secret weapon was the combination of volcanic ash, specifically from the Pozzuoli region, and seawater. The volcanic ash provided a highly reactive silica-alumina compound, while the seawater acted as a catalyst, triggering a slow, long-term chemical reaction between the ash and the lime. As minuscule cracks begin to form in the concrete over centuries, water seeps in. But instead of widening the cracks and causing corrosion, this infiltrating water actually continues the chemical reaction, dissolving the surrounding materials and allowing new, resilient crystals of tobermorite to grow, effectively filling the crack from the inside out. The concrete doesn't just resist decay, it actively heals itself. It's a technology we are feverishly trying to develop in labs today, using encapsulated bacteria or special polymers, yet the Romans had achieved it 2 millennia ago with nothing more than volcanic dust and seawater. The ultimate testament to this material's superiority stands not in the sea, but in the heart of Rome itself. The Pantheon, commissioned by Emperor Hadrian around 126 years after the Common Era, is crowned by a breathtaking dome that remains the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome. It is a single monolithic shell of Roman concrete, spanning an incredible 142 feet in diameter. For nearly 2,000 years, it has endured earthquakes, temperature extremes, and the settling of its own massive weight. Modern engineers, armed with steel rebar and complex stress calculations, would be hesitant to attempt such a feat. The Pantheon's survival is a silent, powerful lecture on the sophistication of Roman material science. They weren't just mixing dirt and rocks, they were nano-engineers manipulating chemistry at a molecular level to create a building material that was, in many ways, superior to our own. This leads us to one of history's great technological mysteries. Why did such a revolutionary formula vanish? How could knowledge that built harbors for eternity and domes for the ages simply slip through the fingers of time? The decline was likely not a single event, but a slow unraveling. The Roman Empire's vast trade and supply networks, which brought specific volcanic ash from Italy to construction sites across the Mediterranean, eventually fractured. As centralized engineering knowledge dissipated, local builders reverted to simpler, more readily available recipes. The precise, almost alchemical process of creating the concrete may have become a guild secret that died with its last masters. Furthermore, the very quality that made it so brilliant, its incredibly long curing and strengthening time, may have made it less appealing in a world becoming increasingly unstable and impatient. When you need to build a defensive wall quickly, you don't have decades to wait for it to reach its maximum strength. The blueprint for self-healing concrete wasn't so much destroyed as it was gradually forgotten, a victim of a collapsing infrastructure for knowledge itself. This incredible mastery of material science, lost for so long, now sets the stage for us to examine structures of an even more immense and mathematically perplexing scale. Now, let's turn our attention from the chemical mastery of Roman concrete to a structure that represents perhaps the ultimate achievement in precision engineering from the ancient world. Rising from the Giza Plateau, the Great Pyramid stands as a monument of such mathematical exactness that it continues to defy simple explanation. Consider for a moment its legendary alignment. The four sides of the pyramid's base are oriented with an almost supernatural accuracy to the four cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. The greatest deviation from true north is a minuscule 3/60ths of a single degree. To put that in perspective, achieving such precision today would typically require sophisticated GPS technology and laser theodolites. The ancient builders, working over 4,500 years ago, managed this feat using methods that remain the subject of intense debate. Some researchers suggest they might have used a method called circle bisection, tracking the shadow of a rod over the course of a day to find an exact east-west line. Others propose they could have used the circumpolar stars, sighting on specific constellations like the Big Dipper or Draco as they rotated around the celestial pole. Regardless of their specific technique, the result is an alignment so perfect it seems to whisper of a lost science of celestial observation and terrestrial measurement. The precision does not stop with its orientation. The base of the Great Pyramid forms a nearly perfect square. The lengths of its four sides are astonishingly close to one another, with the average side measuring around 755.8 feet, and the difference between the longest and shortest sides being less than 2 inches. This represents a margin of error of under 0.1%. Imagine trying to square a foundation the size of a city block using only ropes, wooden pegs, and copper tools, and achieving a level of accuracy that would satisfy a modern surveyor. The sheer scale of this undertaking is almost beyond comprehension. The pyramid is composed of an estimated 2.3 million individual blocks of stone, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons, with some of the massive granite blocks in the inner chambers weighing up to 80 tons. The logistical nightmare of quarrying, transporting, and placing these stones with such consistent precision points to an unimaginable degree of planning, organization, and quality control that lasted for the estimated 20-year construction period. Perhaps even more intriguing than its physical dimensions are the mathematical constants that appear to be encoded within its very geometry. If you take the pyramid's perimeter and divide it by twice its height, you arrive at a figure that is remarkably close to the mathematical constant pi, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. This is not a rough approximation, it is accurate to within a tiny fraction. Similarly, the proportions of the pyramid's faces seem to embody the golden ratio, a number approximately equal to 1.618 that appears frequently in nature and art and is often associated with aesthetic perfection. Now, whether these mathematical relationships were intentional design features or simply emergent properties of the chosen dimensions is a question that has fueled speculation for centuries. Mainstream Egyptology often attributes these relationships to coincidence, arguing that the builders were primarily concerned with practical, symbolic, and religious goals. Yet, the sheer number of these mathematical correspondences makes the coincidence argument increasingly difficult to accept for many. It suggests the possibility that the pyramid's architects possessed a sophisticated understanding of geometry and mathematics that was far more advanced than what is typically credited to the Old Kingdom. This leads us to the pyramid's internal architecture, which is a marvel of structural engineering in its own right. The Grand Gallery, with its towering, corbelled walls, is a masterpiece of weight distribution, designed to channel the immense pressures of the stone above away from the king's chamber below. This chamber itself is built from enormous blocks of red granite, a material incredibly difficult to cut and shape, and it houses a coffer made from a single block of the same hard stone, hollowed out with a precision that would be challenging even with modern diamond-tipped tools. The so-called air shafts that extend from the king's and queen's chambers are aligned with specific stars like Orion and Sirius, which held deep religious significance, indicating that the pyramid was not just a tomb but a machine for the king's celestial rebirth, perfectly integrating astronomy, religion, and engineering into a single, cohesive structure. The knowledge required to execute such a complex, multifaceted project seems almost out of place in its historical context, pointing either to a long, lost period of technological development or to the influence of a much older, advanced source of knowledge that has since vanished from the historical record. High in the mist-shrouded Andes, perched on a narrow ridge between two jagged peaks, sits the ancient city of Machu Picchu. This Incan citadel, built in the 15th century, is more than just an archaeological wonder. It is a masterclass in seismic survival. For over 500 years, it has endured the violent tremors that regularly shake this mountainous region, while many modern structures in nearby Cusco have suffered severe damage or collapse during the same quakes. The secret to its incredible longevity lies not in what the Incas added to their buildings, but in what they deliberately left out. Unlike later Spanish colonial buildings that rely on rigid mortar and brick, the Incas perfected a construction method known as ashlar masonry, where massive stones are cut with such breathtaking precision that they fit together perfectly without any binding agent whatsoever. The process of creating these walls was an engineering feat in itself. Workers would quarry enormous granite blocks, then painstakingly shape them using harder stones and sand as an abrasive. They employed a technique called pillow facing, where the center of each stone was left slightly convex, while the edges were beveled to create tight, interlocking joints. The result is a mosaic of irregular polygonal stones that lock together like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. During an earthquake, this design becomes a dynamic, living system. A rigid wall held together by mortar will crack and fail when subjected to the shearing forces of a tremor, but an Incan wall is designed to move, the stones, free to vibrate and shift independently within their tightly fitted confines, actually dance during seismic activity. They absorb and dissipate the energy of the quake through friction and minor movements, and then, as the shaking subsides, they settle gracefully back into their original positions. It's a brilliant, passive damping system built directly into the fabric of the architecture. This seismic genius extended far beyond the wall construction alone. If you look at the doorways and windows throughout Machu Picchu, you'll notice they are almost exclusively trapezoidal in shape, wider at the bottom and tapering toward the top. This is not merely an aesthetic choice, it is a fundamental principle of earthquake-resistant design. The trapezoid is an inherently stable geometric form, far more resistant to tipping and collapse than a rectangle under lateral loads. Furthermore, the Incas constructed their walls with a slight inward lean, increasing the structure's center of gravity and making it less likely to topple outward. They also consistently used rounded corners on their buildings, which eliminate the vulnerable 90-degree angles where stress concentrations typically form and cause cracks to initiate. Every single design element was meticulously considered to work in harmony against the forces of nature. This raises a profound question that continues to puzzle archaeologists and engineers alike. How did the Incas, without a written language, without the principles of modern geology or physics, and without sophisticated measuring tools, develop such an advanced and systematic understanding of seismic engineering? The answer likely lies in millennia of accumulated observation and empirical experimentation. The Andes is one of the most seismically active zones on the planet. The Incas and their ancestors would have witnessed countless building failures and successes over generations. They learned through trial and error which shapes survived and which crumbled. This knowledge became encoded in their cultural tradition, passed down from master stonemasons to apprentices. They learned to work with the forces of nature rather than against them, creating structures that were flexible, resilient, and beautifully adapted to their environment. This architectural philosophy, born from necessity in the high mountains, represents a blueprint for resilience that modern engineers are only now beginning to fully decode and appreciate, offering timeless lessons in how to build for an uncertain future. Venture south from the Incan highlands down to the arid plains of coastal Peru, and you will find one of the world's most perplexing artistic and engineering achievements sprawling across nearly 200 square miles of desert floor. This is the home of the Nazca Lines, a vast collection of geoglyphs so immense that their full form and breathtaking complexity only reveal themselves from the vantage point of the sky. Etched into the dark, stony desert pavement between 500 years before the Common Era and 500 years after, these creations range from perfectly straight lines that run for miles without a single waver to enormous depictions of animals. A hummingbird with wings outstretched, a spider with meticulously articulated legs, a monkey with a coiled tail. The sheer scale is difficult to comprehend from the ground. The hummingbird alone stretches over 300 feet, while the pelican measures nearly 900 feet from beak to tail. To stand beside them is to see only shallow grooves in the earth, but to soar above is to witness a gallery of giants. The method of their creation speaks to both simplicity and profound sophistication. The Nazca people did not build these lines up with materials. They carved them down by carefully removing the top layer of dark, oxidized stones and gravel to expose the lighter, sand-colored soil beneath. This simple technique created a stark visual contrast that has been preserved for over 2,000 years, thanks to one of the driest and most stable climates on Earth. The real engineering marvel, however, lies not in the how but in the precision. How did a culture without the wheel, without draft animals, and certainly without flight, manage to plot out and execute designs of such monumental scale and geometric perfection? The answer lies in a masterful application of basic surveying principles taken to an extreme. Researchers believe the Nazca engineers likely created smaller-scale models of their designs first. They would then use a system of grids and cords anchored by stakes to transfer the enormous design point by point onto the desert canvas. By clearing pathways along these plotted points and maintaining consistent sightlines, small teams of workers could create segments of a straight line or a curve that, when viewed from the ground, seemed disconnected, but from above coalesced into a perfect, unified image. It was a feat of projective geometry that required an advanced understanding of spatial relationships and meticulous coordination. The purpose behind these colossal blueprints has been the subject of fervent debate for decades. The most enduring theory, proposed by researcher Piri Reis, who dedicated her life to studying the lines, posits that they functioned as a sophisticated astronomical calendar. Certain lines do indeed align with the solstice sun, and some of the animal figures may correlate with constellations important to the Nazca worldview. They could have served as a kind of giant almanac, marking the changing seasons and celestial events critical for agriculture in a harsh environment. A more recent and compelling theory suggests the lines were part of a vast ritual landscape, specifically connected to prayers for water. In a desert where rainfall is scarce and life depends on underground aquifers, the geoglyphs may have been sacred pathways walked during religious ceremonies. The animal forms, many of which are associated with water, fertility, or rain in Andean mythology, could have been offerings to the gods, massive prayers etched into the earth itself to summon the life-giving moisture from the ground and sky. The straight lines, some of which lead to small hills or sources of water, might have marked processional routes for these vital rituals. This leads to the most tantalizing and often misunderstood question of all. If the creators could never see their work from above, why build it on such a scale? The answer likely lies in a fundamentally different relationship between humanity and the divine. The Nazca may not have been creating art for human eyes at all, but rather for the gods in the sky. The lines were not meant to be seen in their totality by people, but to be seen and acknowledged by celestial beings. In this context, the immense scale and precision were not a demonstration of technical prowess for its own sake, but a necessary attribute of a devotional act. The perfection of the form was a measure of the piety and skill of the people, an offering worthy of a deity's attention. This perspective transforms the Nazca Desert from a simple drawing board into a vast temple, where the very act of creation, the communal effort of moving stones and plotting lines, was as important as the finished product. The lines are a physical manifestation of a world, where the earthly and the spiritual were intimately connected, and where engineering served a higher, sacred purpose. This incredible fusion of art, astronomy, and ritualistic engineering stands as a powerful testament to the human capacity to shape the world on a grand scale, not for our own fleeting admiration, but as a permanent plea to the heavens. Now let's journey to one of the most remote inhabited places on Earth, a tiny volcanic island in the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Here, nearly 900 massive stone figures stand in silent, imposing rows, their backs to the sea, their blank eyes gazing over the land. These are the Moai of Rapa Nui, better known as Easter Island, and they present one of archaeology's most captivating logistical puzzles. Carved from compressed volcanic ash at a single quarry inside the Rono Roroku crater, these statues are monuments on an almost unimaginable scale. The average Moai stands about 13 feet high and weighs a staggering 14 tons, roughly the equivalent of 2 full-grown African elephants. But the truly colossal ones, known as the giants of Rano-Raraku, are still partially buried in the quarry slopes, with the largest, named El Gigante, measuring an astonishing 70 feet tall and estimated to weigh over 270 tons if it had ever been completed. The sheer ambition is breathtaking. The Rapa Nui people, numbering at their peak perhaps only in the low thousands, managed to quarry, transport, and erect almost 1,000 of these statues across their island home, all without the use of metal tools, wheels, or large draft animals to assist them. The question of how they achieved this has echoed for centuries, a mystery carved in stone. For a long time, the prevailing theory was that the island's inhabitants must have used a system of log rollers and sledges, laying the moai down and painstakingly dragging them across the landscape. This idea seems logical at first, but it runs into a devastatingly practical problem. Easter Island is famously treeless today, and pollen analysis suggests that when the first Polynesian settlers arrived around 1,200 years after the Common Era, the island was covered in a lush forest of giant palm trees. The conventional narrative has been that the people recklessly cut down all the trees to use as rollers and levers for their statue-building obsession, leading to ecological collapse and societal ruin. This story became a powerful cautionary tale about environmental destruction. However, more recent archaeological work has complicated this picture. While deforestation certainly occurred, the timeline doesn't perfectly align with the peak of moai construction, and the idea of using valuable, massive logs as disposable rollers for a journey of up to 11 miles seems increasingly impractical upon closer inspection. This is where a more dynamic and elegant theory has taken center stage, one that was actually recorded in the oral traditions of the Rapa Nui people themselves. They described the moai as walking across the island to their final positions. For generations, Western researchers dismissed this as pure myth, a poetic explanation for an impossible feat. But then, in 2012, a team of archaeologists decided to take the legend literally. They crafted a concrete replica of a moai, a 10-foot-tall, 5-ton version of the real thing. Then, using 3 strong ropes tied around the statue's head, they demonstrated that a relatively small team of just 18 people could make the statue walk by rocking it from side to side. One team would pull on a rope to tilt the statue forward onto one corner of its base, while another team would then pull it to rock it onto the opposite corner. With a coordinated rhythm, the statue would indeed appear to waddle forward, swaying its way across the landscape in an upright position. It was a stunning demonstration that seemed to validate centuries of oral history. The method was efficient, required far less raw material than log rollers, and explained the absence of wide, cleared roads that would be necessary for dragging. Yet, like any good mystery, the case is not entirely closed. While the walking theory is brilliantly plausible for the medium-sized moai, some researchers question whether it could have worked for the absolute giants, those weighing 50, 80, or even more tons. The forces involved in rocking such an enormous weight would be tremendous, and a single slip could have sent a multi-ton statue crashing to the ground, shattering it and likely killing the workers nearby. Furthermore, archaeologists have found numerous moai that were, in fact, abandoned along the ancient roads, many of them face down, which could be evidence of such catastrophic accidents. This has led to alternative hybrid theories. Perhaps the statues were moved in a horizontal position for part of the journey, suspended in a wooden frame or sledge, that was then pulled over a path of lubricated sweet potatoes or other vegetation to reduce friction. Or maybe the walking method was used for the final, ceremonial approach to the platform, a powerful visual spectacle of the moai arriving in its full, upright glory to be seen by the community. The exact blueprint for Moai transportation may have been a combination of techniques adapted for the size of the statue and the terrain it had to cross. What this mystery ultimately reveals is a lost blueprint for large-scale logistics and communal engineering. The movement of a single Moai was not a task for a small family group. It was a monumental community endeavor that required impeccable coordination, leadership, and a deep understanding of physics, leverage, and rhythm. The Rapa Nui people, isolated from the rest of the world, developed a unique and highly sophisticated solution to a problem of their own making. They possessed an engineering wisdom that was perfectly adapted to their environment and their resources, a knowledge system that was passed down through generations until the social and environmental conditions that supported it eventually changed. The silent Moai, both those standing proudly on their platforms and those still lying along the ancient roads, are not just symbols of a mysterious past. They are permanent reminders of human ingenuity in the face of immense physical challenge, a testament to what a determined community can achieve when they work together to move mountains, or in this case, make giants walk. From the monumental stone puzzles of Easter Island, we travel now to the heart of the ancient world, to a wonder that was celebrated not for its stone, but for its stunning and improbable verdance. Envision, if you will, a towering structure of ascending terraces, built not upon a natural mountain, but rising as an artificial, green-clad ziggurat from the flat, sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia. This was the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon, a spectacle so extraordinary that ancient writers like Strabo and Philo of Byzantium placed it firmly among the 7 wonders of the world. According to tradition, this botanical marvel was the grand romantic gesture of King Nebuchadnezzar II, who reigned around 600 years before the Common Era. He supposedly built it to comfort his wife, Amytis of Media, who longed for the lush, green hills of her homeland. It was a paradise garden, a slice of mountainous forest improbably transplanted into the heart of a sprawling, arid empire, a testament to one king's power and his desire to defy nature itself for love. The true marvel of the Hanging Gardens, however, was not merely the plants it contained, but the life-giving water that sustained them. In a climate where rainfall was scarce and the sun relentless, maintaining a vast garden of exotic trees, vines, and flowers would have required a hydraulic system of staggering sophistication for its time. Ancient descriptions, though written centuries after the gardens were said to have existed, point to an ingenious solution. They speak of a chain pump system, a technology that would have been a masterpiece of mechanical engineering. Imagine a large, continuous loop of rope or chain running over 2 large wheels, one at the riverbank and one at a higher elevation. Attached to this loop at regular intervals would be a series of buckets. As a team of workers turned a treadmill or a large Archimedes screw, the chain would move, dipping the buckets into the Euphrates River, lifting them to a higher terrace, and then tipping their contents into a primary reservoir or channel. This water could then be distributed through a network of smaller channels, gates, and perhaps even more chain pumps, moving it from one terraced level to the next, all the way to the very summit. The engineering knowledge required to design and operate such a system reveals a profound understanding of fundamental principles. The designers would have had to master the concept of mechanical advantage, using gears and levers to allow human or animal power to lift immense volumes of water against the relentless pull of gravity. They would have needed a practical grasp of water pressure and hydraulics to ensure the flow was consistent and powerful enough to reach the uppermost plants without bursting the clay or lead pipes that may have been used. Furthermore, the agricultural science involved cannot be overstated. Different plants on different levels would have had varying water needs, requiring a carefully calibrated irrigation schedule. The garden structure itself would have been a complex feat, with deep foundations and waterproof terraces made from layers of reeds, bitumen, baked bricks, and lead sheeting to prevent the immense weight of soil and water from seeping through and undermining the entire structure. This was not a simple garden. It was a multi-layered, integrated machine for living beauty, a symphony of architecture, mechanics, and horticulture. And yet, for all its fame, the Hanging Gardens present us with a profound and tantalizing archaeological mystery. Despite its legendary status, no definitive physical evidence of the gardens has ever been found in Babylon. Modern excavations at the site have revealed the impressive foundations of Nebuchadnezzar's palace and the city's massive walls, but nothing that can be conclusively identified as the underpinnings of this terraced wonder. This absence has led some scholars to propose a radical theory. Perhaps the gardens were not in Babylon at all. A compelling alternative theory suggests that the Hanging Gardens were actually located in the Assyrian capital of Nineveh and were built by the king Sennacherib a century earlier. Cuneiform tablets from Sennacherib's reign describe his own magnificent palace garden, complete with an elaborate water-raising system using screws and bronze chains, and most tellingly, he explicitly mentions creating a wonder for all peoples. The geographical and archaeological evidence at Nineveh, including the remains of an enormous aqueduct and sophisticated canal system, provides a more concrete foundation for this theory than exists at Babylon. This historical debate does nothing to diminish the garden's significance as a blueprint. In fact, it enriches it. Whether they were built by Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon or by Sennacherib in Nineveh, the detailed descriptions that have come down to us represent a conceptual masterpiece of ancient hydraulic and agricultural engineering. They embody a universal human aspiration to create oasis and order in the most challenging environments. The Hanging Gardens, real or amplified by legend, stand as the ultimate symbol of humanity's desire to harness water, the fundamental source of life, and use it not just for survival but for creating breathtaking beauty. They represent a lost chapter in the history of environmental engineering, a blueprint for turning a desert green, a dream of a paradise on Earth that was so powerful it has captivated the human imagination for over 2,500 years, whether it was ever truly built or not. Now, let's shift our focus from grand architectural gardens to an object small enough to hold in your hands, yet one that contains a mystery just as profound. In the summer of 1908, within the ruins of the Minoan Palace of Phaistos on the Greek island of Crete, Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernia made a discovery that would become an enduring obsession for linguists and historians worldwide. It wasn't a glittering treasure or a magnificent fresco, but a simple, fired clay disc about 6 inches in diameter. Both of its faces were covered, from the outer edge spiraling neatly into the center with a series of strange, intricate symbols. There were human figures walking and heads with feathered headdresses. There were animals like birds and fish. There were tools and weapons and a variety of abstract shapes. At first glance, it appeared to be a form of writing, but this was unlike any writing system ever seen before. The true revolution, the detail that would send shockwaves through the history of technology, was revealed upon closer inspection. Every single one of these 241 symbols was not hand-carved or painted. Each one had been stamped into the soft clay with a separate, pre-formed seal, a piece of movable type before the disc was baked hard. In that single act of stamping, the anonymous creator of this object had employed a technology, movable type printing, that would not appear again in human history for another 3,400 years, until Johannes Gutenberg's press in 15th century Europe. The implications of this are staggering. We are looking at a blueprint for an information revolution that never happened. The Minoan civilization of Crete, which flourished during the Bronze Age, is known for its beautiful palaces and vibrant art, and for two of its undeciphered scripts called Linear and Cretan hieroglyphics. But the Phaistos Disc stands utterly apart. Its 45 distinct symbols form a defined set, a repertoire of reusable type. This suggests a conscious, systematic approach to reproducing information. Someone in the second millennium before the Common Era had conceived of a way to assemble a message from a library of pre-made characters. This is the very essence of printing. It is a conceptual leap of monumental proportions. Why then do we not find thousands of these printed clay tablets all across the Mediterranean? Why is the Phaistos Disc a solitary, unique object with no siblings, no precursors, and no descendants? It is as if a single, brilliant spark of technological genius flashed in the darkness and then was instantly snuffed out, leaving behind this one perfect, lonely artifact as its only witness. The central, maddening mystery of the disc is, of course, what it actually says. For over a century, the world's best codebreakers, linguists, and amateur enthusiasts have tried and failed to decipher its message. The task is fiendishly difficult because we have what cryptographers call a code text without a clear text. We have the encoded message, but we have no Rosetta Stone, no bilingual inscription to provide the key. The disc's isolation is its greatest defense. Is it a religious hymn, a list of royal possessions, a piece of literature, or a legal document? Some researchers have proposed it represents a geometric theorem or an astronomical calendar. Others have suggested it is a prayer to a mother goddess, given the number of symbols that seem to depict female figures. There have been claims of decipherment linking it to ancient Basque, to a Semitic language, even to an early form of Greek, but none of these has gained widespread acceptance within the academic community. The very structure of the message offers clues that only deepen the puzzle. The spiral is divided into sections by incised lines, creating groups of 2 to 7 symbols. These groups seem to be words or phrases, and certain sequences of symbols repeat, suggesting they could be common words or names. But without a much larger body of text to compare it to, statistical analysis can only take us so far. We are, in effect, staring at a single page from a vast, lost library, with no idea how to read it and no other pages to provide context. This leads us to the most haunting question of all. What if the Phaistos Disc is not a message at all, but a demonstration? What if it is itself the blueprint? Perhaps this unique object was not meant to be read, but to be seen as a proof of concept. It could have been a master printer's sample, a display of the technological capability itself. The person who created it may have been showcasing the potential of this new invention, the ability to quickly and accurately reproduce complex information. Imagine a royal court where a scribe proudly presents this disc to a king, explaining that with this method, his decrees could be stamped onto clay tablets and distributed throughout the kingdom with a speed and uniformity never before possible. The technology would have been a source of immense power, and yet, for reasons lost to time, it failed to catch on. Perhaps it was too far ahead of its time, too disruptive to the established scribble class who guarded the power of writing. Maybe the necessary materials or organizational structures weren't in place to support a wider printing industry, or perhaps the volcanic eruption that devastated Thera and crippled Minoan civilization simply intervened, wiping out the knowledge before it could spread. The disc is therefore a ghost of a potential future, a road not taken in the history of communication. It forces us to wonder what other revolutionary technologies might have been born in the ancient world, enjoyed a brief, brilliant existence, and then vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a cryptic clue for future generations to ponder. Deep within the crypts of the Hathor temple at Denderah, far from the bright Egyptian sun, a series of stone panels tell a story that seems to defy conventional history. Carved into the solid rock walls during the Ptolemaic period, around 100 years before the Common Era, these intricate reliefs depict scenes that, to a modern eye, look astonishingly like sophisticated electrical technology. The central object in these carvings is a large, elongated bulb-like shape, often compared to a Crookes tube or a modern glass light bulb. Inside this bulb, a snake-like form stretches along its length, its head pointing toward one end, while a cable, depicted as a twisted rope, connects the base of the object to a box held by a kneeling figure. Another figure stands nearby, gripping the device as if supporting or operating it. The entire assembly looks less like a mythological scene and more like a technical diagram for an illumination device, complete with its power source and operator. To those who see it through a technological lens, this is the Denderah light, a potential blueprint for electrical knowledge that vanished for nearly 2,000 years. The mainstream Egyptological interpretation of these carvings offers a very different, yet equally fascinating explanation. According to most academic scholars, these images are powerful religious symbols, not literal depictions of technology. The bulb-like object is interpreted as a lotus flower, a sacred symbol of creation and rebirth in ancient Egyptian mythology. The snake emerging from it is not a filament but a representation of the primeval serpent god, Hemsut, associated with the creative forces of the universe. The cable is seen as a stylized lotus stem, and the power box is explained as a jed pillar, a symbol of stability and the backbone of the god Osiris. The entire scene, from this perspective, is a complex cosmological illustration showing the moment of creation, where the serpent emerges from the watery chaos represented by the lotus to bring light and order to the world. This interpretation fits perfectly within the known symbolic language of Egyptian temple art, where every element carried deep religious meaning. However, the technological theory presents a compelling counter-argument that cannot be easily dismissed. Proponents of this view point to specific, hard-to-ignore details. The object's shape is strikingly geometric and contained, unlike the more organic and open depictions of lotuses found elsewhere in Egyptian art. The serpent inside is held rigid and straight, confined within the bulb's boundaries, whereas serpents in purely symbolic contexts are often shown winding and free. The cable connects directly to the object's base in a way that suggests a functional, rather than decorative, link. Perhaps most tellingly, these carvings are located in the temple's subterranean crypts, places that would have been plunged into total and absolute darkness. The ancient artisans took immense care to illuminate these hidden chambers with detailed carvings, yet how did they see to create them? Traditional methods like torches or oil lamps would have filled the small, unventilated spaces with smoke and soot, yet the ceilings of the Denderah crypts are remarkably free of such residue. This practical problem lends weight to the idea that the Egyptians might have possessed an alternative, smokeless form of lighting, exactly like the one seemingly depicted on the walls. If we entertain the possibility that the carvings represent a real device, the implications are profound. The setup closely resembles a primitive form of a Jaissler tube or a Crookes tube, early electrical devices that produce light by passing a current through a rarefied gas. The snake could represent the visible plasma arc, the filament of the system. The box held by the kneeling figure might be a type of Leyden jar, an early capacitor for storing static electricity, which could have been generated using methods known to the Egyptians, such as friction or certain chemical reactions. The entire assembly could have functioned as a cold light source, perfectly suited for illuminating sacred, enclosed spaces without the dangers of open flame. This would represent a lost branch of physics and engineering, a practical application of electrical principles that was somehow forgotten, perhaps because the knowledge was confined to a small priestly class and never disseminated widely. This visual puzzle at Denderah forces us to confront a broader and more unsettling question about our interpretation of the ancient world. Are we, in our modern arrogance, too quick to dismiss the symbolic as purely metaphorical? Could it be that ancient cultures recorded their most advanced technological knowledge not in written manuals, but encoded within their sacred art and mythology? The Denderah reliefs are not an isolated case. Similar debates surround other ancient depictions, from what some see as helicopter-like hieroglyphs at the Temple of Seti, the first, to descriptions in Indian epics of flying vehicles called vimanas and powerful weapons that bear a striking resemblance to modern ballistic missiles. These artifacts and texts challenge the linear narrative of progress, suggesting that human technological development may not be a straight, upward line, but a series of peaks and valleys, with knowledge being gained, lost, and sometimes partially rediscovered. The true mystery of Denderah may not be whether the Egyptians had electric light, but whether we have been looking at their world with the right set of eyes, failing to see the possible blueprints for reality hidden within their representations of the divine. Towering above the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, the zigzagging walls of Sacsayhuamán present a sight that seems to defy both physics and common sense. These are not simple stacked stones. They are a colossal, three-dimensional puzzle crafted from limestone blocks so enormous that the largest, standing over 28 feet tall, is estimated to weigh a staggering 360 tons. To put that into perspective, that's heavier than a fully loaded Boeing 757 jetliner. Yet, the sheer mass of these stones is not what leaves visitors and experts alike in a state of awe. It is the impossible, almost supernatural precision with which they are joined. The edges of these irregular, polygonal blocks are cut with such exacting care that they fit together without any mortar, locking into one another with a seam so tight, so flawless, that for centuries people have said not even a single razor blade, nor the thinnest piece of paper, can be inserted between them. This is not rough, primitive construction. It is a masterclass in micro-precision executed on a megalithic scale. The methods used to achieve this perfection remain one of history's most tantalizing secrets. The Incas had no iron or steel, no wheels or pulleys, and no written language to record their engineering principles. So how did they do it? One of the most enduring and fascinating theories involves a supposed lost technique for softening stone. Local legends and some alternative researchers suggest the Incas possessed a plant-based liquid, a secret formula derived from local vegetation that could temporarily soften the surface of the limestone, making it malleable like clay. In this softened state, the blocks could be shaped and molded against one another, creating a perfect custom fit. Once the chemical agent wore off, the stone would reharden, locked permanently into its neighbor. While no direct evidence of such a substance has been found, the theory is fueled by the uncanny, almost plastic quality of the stone joints, which sometimes appear slightly melted or molded together rather than chiseled. Modern science has shown that certain acidic compounds from plants can indeed etch limestone, but replicating a temporary softening effect powerful enough for such construction remains elusive. A more widely accepted, yet no less brilliant, theory focuses on the Incas' profound understanding of geometry and repetitive, patient craftsmanship. This was not a haphazard process. It is believed that stonemasons would first roughly shape a block at the quarry. Then, at the construction site, a new block would be painstakingly trial-fitted against the one already in place. Workers would use harder stones as hammerstones to peck away at the contact points, gradually refining the shape. They might have employed a technique of marking the high spots with a colored paste. When the new block was lowered onto its neighbor, the paste would transfer, showing the artisans exactly where to grind away more stone. This cut-and-try method, repeated hundreds upon hundreds of times for each block, would slowly but surely create that legendary airtight join. The complex, interlocking shapes were not an artistic choice but a deliberate engineering feature. The irregular polygons and inward-leaning walls created a structure that was incredibly stable, distributing weight and stress evenly throughout the entire wall, rather than concentrating it along straight, vulnerable lines. The ultimate test of this engineering genius has been the relentless force of nature itself. The Andes Mountains are one of the most seismically active regions on the planet, and Cusco has been shaken by powerful earthquakes for centuries. Time and again, these tremors have rattled the city, and time and again, the results have provided a dramatic, real-world comparison. The Spanish colonial buildings, constructed with straight walls and simple, rectangular stones held together with mortar, have repeatedly cracked, crumbled, and required extensive repairs. Meanwhile, the Inca walls of Sacsayhuamán have simply danced. During an earthquake, the polygonal stones in these walls, free to vibrate and shift minutely within their tightly fitted confines, absorb and dissipate the seismic energy. They move as individual units within a unified, flexible whole. When the shaking stops, they settle back into place, their perfectly engineered joints as secure as the day they were set. This seismic resilience is not an accident. It is the direct result of a construction philosophy that embraced complexity, precision, and a deep understanding of how to work in harmony with the powerful forces of the natural world, rather than attempting to rigidly oppose them. The silent, enduring walls of Sacsayhuamán stand as a permanent challenge to our modern assumptions, a stone-cut question mark asking us what fundamental principles of construction we might have overlooked in our pursuit of speed and simplicity. While the stone walls of Sacsayhuamán represent a physical mystery we can touch and measure, our next enigma is one of pure information, locked away behind a barrier of incomprehensible symbols. Housed today in Yale University's Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library, the Voynich Manuscript is arguably the most stubbornly mysterious book in the world. On the surface, it is a small, unassuming codex of 240 vellum pages, its cover blank, its history obscure, but open it, and you enter a world that is at once vividly detailed and utterly alien. Its pages are filled with flowing text written in an unknown script, an alphabet of strange, looping characters that have never been seen in any other document on Earth. This text flows around and through a stunning series of illustrations that only deepen the mystery. There are pages dedicated to bizarre, unidentifiable plants with roots and leaves that seem to defy known botany. There are intricate astronomical diagrams featuring unfamiliar constellations and celestial charts. There are drawings of tiny, nude women bathing in a complex, interconnected system of green pools and pipes that looks remarkably like a schematic for a biological or hydraulic system. And there are cosmological fold-out pages that depict what appear to be island fortresses connected by causeways to a central, erupting volcano. The physical object itself has been rigorously studied. Carbon dating places its vellum creation to the early 15th century, between 1404 and 1438. The ink was applied shortly after, confirming it is a genuine medieval or Renaissance-era artifact, not a modern forgery. We know it once belonged to Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II of Prague, and it later passed through the hands of alchemists and book collectors before being purchased by the Polish book dealer Wilfrid Voynich in 1912, from whom it gets its name. Yet before its emergence in his hands, its provenance vanishes into mist. Who wrote it and for what unimaginable purpose remains the central, unanswered question. The text itself has been analyzed by the world's top cryptographers, including codebreakers from both world wars who successfully cracked complex military ciphers, yet they all met their match in this peculiar book. The script shows statistical patterns consistent with a real, natural language. It has word entropy and letter frequency that feel authentic, yet it corresponds to no known tongue. In recent years, sophisticated artificial intelligence has been trained on its patterns, with some systems suggesting a possible link to Hebrew or other Near Eastern languages, but these results remain speculative and have not led to a coherent translation. The manuscript resists every single key we have tried to turn in its lock. This profound resistance to decipherment has fueled a fascinating and wide-ranging debate about its true nature. One of the most compelling theories is that it is precisely what it appears to be, a scientific or engineering text, a blueprint of knowledge from a forgotten tradition. The so-called biological section, with its network of pools and channels populated by bathing figures, could be an allegorical or literal depiction of the human circulatory or lymphatic system, knowledge that was not formally understood in Europe until centuries later. The intricate, otherworldly plants might be detailed pharmacological studies of herbs from a distant land, their properties and preparations described in the accompanying text. The astronomical sections could contain observations and theories about the cosmos that were outside the mainstream Ptolemaic model of the time. In this view, the manuscript is a devastating loss, a library of advanced proto-scientific understanding encoded for secrecy, perhaps to protect heretical knowledge from the scrutiny of the Church, only to become so well protected that the knowledge was lost forever. A counter-theory, which has gained significant traction, posits that the manuscript is an elaborate and sophisticated hoax. The argument is that a clever forger, perhaps even its known owner, Emperor Rudolf II, created a beautiful, nonsensical book to sell as a priceless secret to a wealthy patron fascinated by the occult. The language would then be a complex gibberish, carefully constructed to mimic the patterns of real speech without conveying any meaning whatsoever. The strange plants would be fantastical composites imagined by the artist. This would explain why the text has never been cracked, because there is nothing to crack. Yet, this theory struggles with the incredible, painstaking consistency of the manuscript. The amount of effort required to create hundreds of pages of coherently patterned gibberish and intricate, unique illustrations for a simple fraud seems excessive. Furthermore, the vellum and ink are genuinely old, meaning if it is a hoax, it is a contemporary one created at great cost and for unclear gain. A more nuanced possibility lies somewhere in between. The manuscript could be a work of glossolalia or automatic writing, produced in a trance-like state by a spiritualist or an early psychologist attempting to tap into the subconscious. The script and images would then be a form of proto-surrealist art, meaningful only to its creator as a spiritual or psychological map. Alternatively, it could be written in a highly abbreviated and personalized cipher meant for a single reader, a kind of memory aid for complex ideas that the author already held in their mind. In this scenario, the key was never written down and it died with the author, leaving behind a beautiful but permanently locked chest of ideas. The Voynich Manuscript thus stands as the ultimate symbol of lost information. It is a haunting reminder that knowledge is fragile and that the most complex encryption isn't done with machines, but with the mortality of the human mind. It represents a universe of potential understanding sitting just on the other side of a veil we cannot tear, a permanent question mark written in a hand we can no longer read. While the Voynich Manuscript represents a mystery locked away in vellum and cipher, our next enigma is one you can actually visit, touch, and stand in awe of today. In the humid heat of Homestead, Florida, stands a monument to one man's quiet, stubborn obsession, a sprawling complex of massive stone sculptures known as Coral Castle. What makes this place utterly extraordinary is not just the art itself, but the story of its creator. Between 1923 and 1951, a single, diminutive Latvian immigrant named Edward Līdzkalnis, standing just 5 feet tall and weighing barely 100 pounds, single-handedly quarried, carved, transported, and erected over 1,100 tons of oolite limestone, a dense coral-like rock. He did this entirely by himself, mostly under the cover of darkness, and he did it with stones that dwarfed him, including a towering obelisk weighing 28 tons and a massive revolving stone gate that balanced so perfectly a child could push it open, yet was so precisely engineered it required no maintenance for decades after his death. When asked how he managed such superhuman feats, Līdzkalnis would offer only a cryptic, simple answer. He claimed he had rediscovered the secret of the pyramids, that he understood how the ancient builders of Egypt and Peru manipulated the laws of weight and leverage. The methods he employed remain as sealed a secret today as they were during his lifetime. Līdzkalnis was intensely private, building high walls around his work and often laboring at night to prevent anyone from witnessing his techniques. The few who claimed to have glimpsed his work spoke of him using simple tripods made of old telephone poles, with chains and blocks hanging from them. They reported hearing him sing to the stones as if coaxing them into position. When the burgeoning town of Florida City began to encroach on his original site, he made a decision that seems almost as impossible as his construction work. He purchased a new plot of land 10 miles away in Homestead, and over the course of 3 years single-handedly moved his entire castle, piece by multi-ton piece, loading the massive stones onto a borrowed truck and transporting them to their new home. He never accepted help, and he never explained how he loaded the truck alone. The tools he left behind were rudimentary, almost comically inadequate for the task. Simple chains, metal bars, ropes, and a collection of makeshift winches and pulleys. There were no engines, no cranes, no signs of advanced machinery. It was as if he was deliberately leaving behind a false trail, a collection of props to mislead the curious. This has led to a century of speculation about the true source of his ability. The most straightforward theory is that Līdzkalnis was a self-taught genius in leverage and counterweight systems. With an almost supernatural understanding of the center of gravity and pivot points, he could have used his simple tools to walk the stones, rocking them incrementally forward, or lifted them using a complex system of balanced weights. He might have used the principle of the shaduf, a simple counterweighted lever used since ancient times to lift water, but scaled up dramatically to handle immense stone blocks. Others have proposed more esoteric explanations. Līdzkalnis himself wrote pamphlets on magnetism and claimed to have discovered the fundamental principles of cosmic force. He believed all matter was made of individual magnets, and by understanding their polarity, one could neutralize or redirect weight. While mainstream physics dismisses this, it raises the intriguing possibility that he stumbled upon some practical, applied principle of electromagnetic or acoustic levitation that science has yet to formally recognize. He was, after all, working in an era when the mysteries of alternating current and radio waves were still fresh and poorly understood by the public. The true significance of Coral Castle is not necessarily in proving one theory over another, but in its existence as a modern, tangible proof of concept. Edward Līdzkalnis demonstrated in the 20th century that a single individual without access to industrial technology or a large workforce could accomplish megalithic construction. His achievement forces us to re-evaluate the ancient puzzles we've been exploring. We often assume that building the pyramids or erecting the Moai of Easter Island required either tens of thousands of workers or technology so advanced it borders on the alien. Leedskalnin presents a third option, the application of a simple yet profound principle of physics that has been overlooked or forgotten. He serves as a living bridge between the ancient and the modern, a man who claimed to have unlocked a secret that empowered the builders of old. His castle is a permanent, open-air challenge to our assumptions, asking us if the true secret to ancient engineering wasn't in complex machinery, but in a deeper, more elegant understanding of the natural forces that surround us all, waiting to be mastered once again by someone with the patience and insight to see the world differently. Now, let's set sail from the tangible stone wonders of Coral Castle to a mystery drawn on parchment, a map that seems to chart lands that, according to everything we know, should have been completely invisible to its creator. In the year 1513, in the bustling Ottoman port city of Constantinople, an admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis completed a detailed world map, a synthesis of his lifetime of experience at sea. He inscribed notes on the map itself, explaining that he had used about 20 source charts for his work, including several he described as dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. For centuries, this beautiful artifact was little more than a historical curiosity, gathering dust in the Imperial Library. Then, in 1929, it was rediscovered, and when modern scholars finally laid eyes upon it, they were confronted with an image that defied all logical explanation. There, at the bottom of the map, was a landmass that bore a startling resemblance to the coastline of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica, a continent that would not be officially sighted by European explorers for another 300 years, and whose coasts remain buried under miles of ice to this day. The implications of this are staggering. The Piri Reis Map doesn't just show a vague, hypothetical southern land. Its depiction of the coastline is remarkably accurate when compared to modern seismic surveys of the land beneath the Antarctic ice cap. This presents an almost impossible paradox. How could a 16th-century cartographer, working with the limited geographical knowledge of his day, map a continent that was not only undiscovered, but whose true shape had been concealed by a colossal ice sheet for millions of years? The most straightforward explanation, and the one favored by mainstream scholarship, is that the landmass at the bottom of the map is not Antarctica at all, but a composite, speculative drawing based on distorted reports of the southern coast of South America, perhaps blended with ancient legends of a great southern continent. They argue that the apparent accuracy is a coincidence, a trick of projection and wishful thinking. Yet, this interpretation struggles to account for the specific, non-random details that align so well with the subglacial topography. If it is a coincidence, it is an astronomically unlikely one. This leads to the more radical and fascinating theory that Piri Reis was indeed working from much older source maps, just as he claimed, maps that preserved the geographical knowledge of a sophisticated, seafaring civilization from a distant epoch. Proponents of this view, like the late Professor Charles Hapgood, suggest that the original cartographers must have possessed an understanding of spherical trigonometry to account for the map's surprising accuracy in longitude, a problem that European sailors would not solve for another 2 centuries. They posit that these ancient mariners conducted a systematic survey of the entire planet, including Antarctica, at a time when its coasts were free of ice. This would push the timeline for such advanced exploration back to a prehistoric period, perhaps over 10,000 years ago, when the last ice age was waning and parts of the Antarctic coastline might have been temporarily exposed. The knowledge from this global survey was then passed down, copied and recopied, its origins forgotten, until fragments of it found their way into the hands of cartographers like Piri Reis, who faithfully incorporated them without fully understanding what they represented. The true genius of the Piri Reis Map, therefore, may not be in its own creation, but in what it preserves. It acts as a fragile, paper-thin window into a lost age of exploration. Imagine the chain of knowledge required. First, an unknown civilization with seafaring capabilities far beyond what we attribute to the ancient world. They would have needed ships capable of withstanding treacherous southern oceans and navigational methods precise enough to chart thousands of miles of coastline. Their cartography would have required a mathematical foundation that understood the Earth as a sphere and could accurately project its curved surface onto a flat sheet, a concept that was only rediscovered in Europe during the Renaissance. Then, this priceless geographical library had to survive the collapse of its parent civilization, perhaps preserved in the great libraries of Alexandria or Constantinople, only to be scattered and lost again, leaving behind only these ghostly traces in a handful of surviving maps. The Piri Reis Map is not an anomaly. It is part of a family of such documents, including the Orontius Phineus and the Buach maps, which all seem to show an ice-free Antarctica with similar, eerily accurate coastal details, suggesting they all drew from a common, ancient source. So we are left with a profound choice between two narratives. One is a story of fortunate mistakes and imaginative guesswork, where early mapmakers accidentally created an image that prefigured a future discovery. The other is a far more dramatic tale of a lost golden age, a cycle of civilization where advanced knowledge was gained, only to be wiped away by some cataclysm or simply eroded by the slow passage of millennia, leaving behind only cryptic clues in the form of a map that should not exist. The Piri Reis Map challenges the very linearity of human progress, suggesting that our history is not a simple, upward climb from ignorance to enlightenment, but a story with forgotten chapters, where entire epochs of achievement may have risen and fallen, leaving behind only the faintest of echoes on a piece of parchment, waiting for a future generation to look upon them and question everything. They thought they knew about the past, standing alone on the high, wind-swept Bolivian Altiplano. The Gate of the Sun is a monument of profound and silent intelligence. Carved from a single, enormous block of andesite granite weighing an estimated 10 tons, this massive archway is the most iconic remnant of the Tiwanaku civilization, which flourished over 1,500 years ago. At first glance, it appears to be a beautifully crafted but inscrutable relic, its surface covered with intricate geometric carvings. But to the trained eye, these are not mere decorations. They are the components of a sophisticated and complex machine made of stone, a permanent astronomical calendar designed to track the cycles of the heavens with a precision that would not be out of place in a modern observatory. The central figure, often called the staff god, stands imposingly at the center of the lintel, holding a ceremonial staff in each hand. His head is framed by a magnificent radiating headdress from which stream 24 rays, each ending in either a human face or a puma's head. This figure is the anchor of the entire design, the focal point from which a cosmic system unfolds. The true genius of the gate is revealed in the 48 smaller, winged figures that flank the central deity, arranged in 3 rows of 8 on each side. For a long time, these were thought to be a uniform procession of identical beings. However, closer examination reveals subtle, deliberate variations among them. Some figures are depicted with condor heads symbolizing the upper world, while others have puma heads representing the earthly plane. These are not random artistic choices, they are symbolic codes. Researchers like astronomer and anthropologist Professor Neil Steed have proposed that this entire ensemble functions as a precise calendrical device. The central figure's 24 rays likely correspond to the 24 hours in a day, while the 48 attendants may represent the 48 weeks in a solar year, according to the Tiwanaku's unique timekeeping system. This layout allowed the priests and astronomers of Tiwanaku to keep accurate track of the solar year, essential for determining the optimal times for planting and harvesting in their challenging high-altitude environment. But the gate's capabilities extend far beyond simply marking the passage of days. Its most breathtaking feature is its alignment with celestial events, particularly the cycles of Venus. The Tiwanaku held Venus in exceptionally high regard, viewing its appearances as the morning and evening star as events of great spiritual significance. The entire gate itself was positioned to function as a giant sighting device. On the morning of the spring equinox, the rising sun would have aligned perfectly with the gateway, its rays illuminating the central figure in a dramatic display of light and shadow. This annual event would have served as a powerful reset for the calendar, a celestial confirmation that the cosmic order was intact. Furthermore, the complex repetitions and counts embedded in the carvings, the number of rays, figures, and other elements create a mathematical matrix that accurately models the 584-day synodic cycle of Venus. This is the time it takes for Venus to return to the same position in the sky relative to the Sun, a cycle that was of immense importance to many ancient Mesoamerican cultures, but which the Tiwanaku appear to have mastered independently and encoded in stone centuries earlier. This level of astronomical integration required a deep and sustained program of celestial observation. The Tiwanaku civilization had no written language as we know it, and they possessed no optical instruments like telescopes. Their entire understanding of the cosmos was built upon generations of meticulous naked eye observation, painstakingly recording the movements of celestial bodies against fixed points on the horizon. This knowledge was then translated into a symbolic language and permanently inscribed into their most sacred architecture. The Gate of the Sun was not merely a functional tool, it was a library, a textbook, and a cathedral all fused into one. It represents a complete fusion of science and spirituality, where understanding the cosmos was synonymous with understanding the divine. The ability to predict the movements of Venus and the Sun would have granted the priestly class immense authority, allowing them to demonstrate a tangible connection to the gods and to regulate the agricultural and ceremonial cycles that governed all of society. The existence of such a sophisticated device in South America around 500 years after the Common Era forces a significant reconsideration of the history of science. While European astronomy was still in its infancy during the early Middle Ages, often mired in mythological interpretations of the heavens, the Tiwanaku were engaging in precise, empirical observation and creating permanent, mathematical models of planetary motion. They were, in effect, architectural astronomers, building their understanding of time and space directly into the landscape. This raises a compelling and almost haunting question. If this single, surviving gateway contains such a wealth of cosmic knowledge, what other astronomical secrets were held within the other structures of the vast and largely ruined Tiwanaku complex? The Gate of the Sun stands as a silent sentinel, a master blueprint for turning architecture into a window on the universe, proving that the drive to comprehend the stars is a fundamental and ancient human impulse, one that found brilliant expression in the most unexpected corners of the world. Hidden beneath the rural landscape of Zhejiang province in China lies a mystery that was, for centuries, completely forgotten by the world above. It was in 1992 that a local farmer, curious about a seemingly bottomless pond in his village, decided to investigate. He and his neighbors began the enormous task of pumping the water out, a process that took 17 continuous days and nights. What they revealed was not a natural cavern, but something far more astonishing. An enormous hand-carved underground hall with walls, pillars, and ceilings all meticulously sculpted from the solid sandstone bedrock. This was the first of what would become 24 such caves discovered in the Longyou region, a sprawling subterranean complex covering a staggering 30,000 square meters, an area equivalent to about 5.5 standard American football fields. The sheer volume of rock removed to create this complex is estimated at nearly 1 million cubic meters, a feat of excavation that would be ambitious even with modern machinery. Yet, according to carbon dating and analysis of sediments, these caverns were created at least 2,000 years ago, during a period that historians traditionally associate with the Western Han Dynasty. Stepping inside one of these caves is an experience that defies expectation. The scale is immediately humbling, with the largest caverns reaching heights of over 90 feet and supported by massive, evenly spaced pillars that the builders intentionally left in place to hold up the immense weight of the ceiling. But it is the attention to detail that is truly breathtaking. Every single surface, the walls, the pillars, the high ceilings, is covered in a uniform, decorative pattern of parallel chisel marks. These are not rough, utilitarian gouges. They are a continuous, rhythmic series of lines carved at a consistent angle of exactly 60 degrees, running in uninterrupted bands across vast expanses of stone. The effect is one of stunning, almost obsessive uniformity, suggesting that the creators were not merely digging out space, but were carefully finishing and decorating the interior to a specific, high standard. This decorative effort alone would have represented a monumental increase in labor, transforming a massive excavation project into a work of profound, coordinated artistry. The purpose of this patterning remains one of the cave's many puzzles. It could have been for acoustic reasons, for religious symbolism, or simply as a signature of a culture that valued aesthetic precision on a grand scale. The engineering foresight displayed throughout the complex reveals a sophisticated understanding of principles that we consider fundamental to modern structural and geological engineering. The builders did not simply dig randomly. They planned the layout of the caves with remarkable care, ensuring that the pillars were positioned at regular intervals to provide optimal support, effectively distributing the tremendous load of the rock above. Even more impressively, they integrated a complete drainage system. The floors were carved with a gentle, deliberate slope, leading to carefully designed channels and gutters that would collect and direct any water seepage toward sump pits. This system was so effective that even after 2 millennia of being flooded, the structural integrity of the caves remained perfect. There were no signs of collapse or water-induced erosion. This indicates that the ancient engineers possessed a deep, practical knowledge of the local hydrology and the properties of the sandstone they were working with. They understood that water management was not an afterthought, but a critical component of ensuring the long-term survival of their underground creation. All of this leads to the two great, unresolved questions that hang over the Longyou Caves. Why were they built, and how was such a colossal project accomplished? The how is a puzzle of logistics and technique. With an estimated 1 million cubic meters of rock to remove, the workload is almost incomprehensible. If a single worker could excavate 1 cubic meter of stone per day, an optimistic estimate when using only hand tools like hammers and chisels, it would have required 1,000 people working every single day for nearly 3 years just to dig out the space. And this doesn't account for the vastly more time-consuming process of carving the intricate, uniform markings on every surface. which some experts estimate could have doubled or even tripled the total construction time. How was such a massive workforce housed, fed, and organized? Where did they dispose of all the excavated rock, as there is no large corresponding mound of debris anywhere in the immediate vicinity? The precision of the angles, the consistency of the pillar placement, and the perfect symmetry of the chisel marks all suggest the use of advanced measuring and layout techniques that have left no trace behind. They worked in near total darkness, yet achieved a level of uniformity that would be difficult to replicate without electric light. The methods remain a complete enigma. The question of why is perhaps even more perplexing. The caves show no signs of human habitation, no soot from fires, no artifacts, no burials, and no inscriptions of any kind. They were not tombs, not quarries, and not defensive bunkers. Their sheer size and the incredible effort invested in their decorative finishing suggest a public or ceremonial purpose of the utmost importance. Some theorists have proposed they were imperial storehouses or secret troop shelters, but the lack of any functional infrastructure makes these ideas unlikely. Others have suggested they were sacred spaces, perhaps used for rituals connected to the earth or the underworld, with the resonant acoustics of the carved chambers enhancing ceremonial music or chanting. A more speculative theory points to their possible use as astronomical observatories, with specific shafts or alignments yet to be discovered that could track celestial events. The most compelling and simplest answer, however, may be that we are looking at a project that was as much about the process as the final product. The coordinated, monumental labor required to build the Longyou Caves would have been a powerful act of social and political unification, a way for a ruler or a culture to demonstrate their authority and organizational power by commanding a literal reshaping of the world. The caves stand as a silent, underground monument not to a specific event, but to the sheer, awe-inspiring capability of an ancient society whose name and purpose have been completely erased from history, leaving behind only these vast, echoing halls as a testament to their forgotten genius. Imagine a naval battle in the 7th century where the fate of an empire hangs in the balance. The Arab fleet, vast and confident, closes in on the walls of Constantinople. Just as their ships are about to breach the city's defenses, the Byzantine dromon galleys unleash their secret weapon. From bronze tubes mounted on their prows, they project a roaring, liquid fire that clings to the wooden hulls and sails of the enemy vessels. This is not ordinary fire. It burns on the very surface of the sea, defying water. Panicked sailors throw buckets of seawater onto the flames, only to see them burn more fiercely. The air fills with smoke and the terrifying screams of men caught in an inferno that cannot be quenched. This was Greek fire, the superweapon that saved the Byzantine Empire time and again, and secured its dominion over the Mediterranean for nearly 500 years. Its psychological impact was as devastating as its physical destruction, creating an aura of invincibility around the Byzantine navy and striking sheer terror into the hearts of their adversaries. The secret to this terrifying weapon was not just its incendiary nature, but its unique and bizarre properties that seemed to defy the known laws of nature. Historical accounts, primarily from Byzantine and Arab sources, describe a sticky, liquid substance that was projected both as a spray from siphons and in clay grenades. Once ignited, it was famously hydrophobic, meaning it would not only continue to burn on water, but would actually be intensified by attempts to douse it with water. Sand or vinegar were reportedly the only somewhat effective ways to smother the flames, though even these methods were unreliable. The fire was also said to be capable of burning on almost any surface and was incredibly difficult to extinguish once it had taken hold. Some chroniclers even describe the flames as being accompanied by loud, thunderous noises and great clouds of smoke, adding a psychological and almost supernatural dimension to its use in battle. It was a weapon that felt less like a product of human chemistry and more like a force of elemental fury harnessed from the underworld. So, what was this miraculous and horrifying substance made of? The precise formula was such a closely guarded state secret that it was known only to a select few, including the Byzantine emperor and a single family of chemists, often said to be from Constantinople. This intense secrecy was a deliberate strategic policy. The knowledge was never written down in a detailed, comprehensive form that could be captured or reverse engineered. It was passed orally from father to son, creating a human chain of custody that was ultimately broken. Modern forensic historians and chemists, analyzing the historical descriptions, have pieced together a likely recipe based on available ingredients in the region. The primary ingredient was almost certainly a form of crude petroleum or naphtha, a naturally occurring liquid hydrocarbon that seeps from the ground in certain areas. This would have provided the flammable base. To this, the Byzantines likely added pine resin or pitch, which would give the mixture its sticky, adhesive quality, allowing it to cling to ships and men. The most mysterious component, the one that gave Greek fire its water-resistant and intensifying properties, may have been a salt such as quicklime, which generates intense heat when it reacts with water, or perhaps even potassium nitrate or phosphorus compounds. Some theories even suggest the inclusion of calcium phosphide, which releases phosphine gas upon contact with water, a gas that ignites spontaneously in air. This combination of ingredients would create a horrific, self-sustaining chemical reaction that water would only feed. The delivery system for this volatile concoction was as ingenious as the formula itself. The Byzantines used a complex device called a cherasiphon, a hand-pumped siphon that functioned like a primitive flamethrower. This was not a simple pot of burning oil. The liquid was likely heated in a large, pressurized bronze tank on the deck of the ship. A pump would then force the liquid through a leather or bronze hose and out of a nozzle, where a soldier would touch a torch to the stream, creating a continuous jet of fire directed at enemy vessels. The use of pressurized siphons required a sophisticated understanding of mechanics and the properties of volatile liquids. The operators had to be incredibly skilled and brave, as a malfunction could easily result in the entire ship being consumed by its own weapon. This integrated system of chemistry and mechanical engineering gave the Byzantine navy a tactical advantage that was completely unmatched for centuries, allowing them to project power far beyond their numerical strength and defend their capital from seemingly certain defeat on multiple occasions. The ultimate fate of Greek fire is a powerful lesson in how fragile advanced knowledge can be. As the Byzantine Empire gradually declined, the secret began to fade. The specialized craftsmen who knew the formula may have died without passing it on, or the precise manufacturing process may have been disrupted by the loss of a key supplier or territory. When Constantinople finally fell to the Ottoman Turks in 1453, the secret was lost forever. The new rulers did not possess the knowledge, and any remaining records or experts vanished into the chaos of the fallen empire. Subsequent attempts to recreate Greek fire, from medieval alchemists to modern laboratories, have only produced inferior imitations. We can create burning liquids, but we have never successfully replicated the exact combination of properties that made the Byzantine weapon so unique and so terrifyingly effective. It was not merely a recipe that was lost, but an entire school of applied chemical engineering, a specialized branch of pyrotechnic science that vanished from the world. This single lost blueprint forces us to wonder what other advanced chemical processes, from sophisticated metallurgy to early forms of industrial production, might have been developed in antiquity only to be erased by war, social collapse, or the simple, silent passage of time. Deep in the river deltas and jungle clearings of southern Costa Rica, one of archaeology's most elegant and enigmatic puzzles lies scattered across the landscape. Discovered in the 1930s when the United Fruit Company was clearing land for banana plantations, these are the stone spheres of the Dikwi's culture, and their silent, perfect forms present a challenge that is as much about geometry as it is about history. Ranging in size from small, handheld orbs just a few inches across to colossal spheres over 8 feet in diameter, weighing as much as 16 tons, they number in the hundreds. What makes them truly extraordinary is not their age, which spans from around 300 to 1500 years after the Common Era, but their breathtaking precision. Many of these spheres are so perfectly round that when modern engineers measured them with precision tools, they found deviations of less than 2 millimeters across their entire surface. To achieve such geometric perfection in granite, one of the hardest stones to work without metal tools, without the wheel, and without any known system of standardized measurement, is a feat that seems to border on the magical. The process of their creation is a lost art, a blueprint for stoneworking that has vanished from human memory. Archaeologists believe the Dikwi's people began with large, raw boulders of granodiorite, a coarse-grained igneous rock. The initial shaping was likely achieved through a combination of controlled heating and cooling. By building fires against the stone and then rapidly cooling specific areas with water, they could create thermal stress fractures, causing flakes of the hard rock to fall off. This rough form would then have been painstakingly refined into its spherical shape. The primary method for this refinement was pecking and grinding. Using hammerstones made of an even harder rock like gabbro or quartz, craftsmen would have spent generations literally pecking away at the surface, gradually wearing down the high spots. They would then finish the sphere by grinding it with sand and water, using a polishing stone or perhaps even a piece of leather, in a process that could have taken decades for the largest examples. The true genius, however, lies in how they maintained their spherical form throughout this exhaustive process. Without calipers or templates, they must have developed an incredibly sophisticated eye for symmetry and curvature, perhaps using a system of plumb lines or suspended cords to constantly check for deviations, or developing a conceptual understanding of three-dimensional geometry that allowed them to hold the perfect form in their mind's eye throughout the many years of labor. This leads to the great logistical puzzle. How were these multi-ton spheres moved from their quarries, often located in the foothills of the Talamanca Mountains, to their final locations dozens of miles away across rugged terrain, swamps, and rivers? The Dikwi's culture had no draft animals, no carts, and no known system of pulleys. The most plausible theory involves a combination of manpower, leverage, and clever engineering. They likely used wooden sledges or rollers, moving the spheres over log rails. For river crossings, they might have floated them on large, specially built rafts. The transportation of a single large sphere would have been a monumental community effort, requiring the coordinated labor of dozens, if not hundreds, of people. It would have demanded expert knowledge of physics, understanding how to balance the massive weight, how to overcome friction, and how to navigate difficult inclines and declines without losing control. The very act of moving these spheres was as much an engineering achievement as carving them, representing a deep, communal knowledge of logistics and large-scale project management that we can only partially reconstruct. The ultimate mystery, however, is not how they were made or moved, but why. What purpose did these perfect forms serve that justified such an immense and sustained investment of time and energy? One of the most compelling theories is that they functioned as astronomical markers. Some of the spheres have been found arranged in alignments that correspond to celestial events, such as the position of the sun during the solstices or equinoxes. They could have served as a permanent stone calendar for an agricultural society, helping to dictate the optimal times for planting and harvesting. Another prominent theory posits that they were powerful status symbols. The size, quantity, and placement of spheres at a settlement could have denoted the social rank, wealth, and authority of a chief or a clan. In this view, they were three-dimensional currency of political power, a way of making social hierarchy permanently and visibly manifest in the landscape. A more spiritual interpretation suggests they represented celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, or planets, and were arranged to create sacred maps of the cosmos, connecting the earthly realm with the heavenly one. They may have been seen as containers of spiritual energy or as markers of ceremonial spaces. The diversity of their locations, from hilltops to river mouths, suggests their purpose may have been as multifaceted as the culture that created them, serving simultaneously as practical tools, social signifiers, and sacred objects in a world where science, status, and spirituality were seamlessly intertwined. From the silent geometric perfection of the Costa Rican spheres, we turn now to one of history's most electrifying legends, an object that blurs the line between divine miracle and advanced technology. The Ark of the Covenant, as described in the Hebrew Bible, was far more than a simple ornate chest. It was a device of immense and terrifying power. According to the Book of Exodus, its construction was dictated to Moses on Mount Sinai with specifications of astonishing precision. It was to be a box made of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits high. This wooden core was to be overlaid entirely with pure gold, both inside and out, and it was to be crowned with a solid gold lid called the mercy seat, flanked by two hammered gold cherubim with outstretched wings facing one another. This detailed blueprint, focusing heavily on specific, non-corrosive metals and exact dimensions, reads less like a description of a religious icon and more like the technical schematics for a sophisticated piece of equipment. The biblical narratives surrounding the Ark are filled with incidents that sound remarkably like accounts of a powerful, malfunctioning, or misused electrical apparatus. In the second book of Samuel, a man named Uzzah reached out to steady the ark as the oxen pulling its cart stumbled. The text states that the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God struck him there for his error, and he died there beside the ark of God. This sudden death from casual contact is eerily reminiscent of a high-voltage electrical discharge. Similarly, in the book of Leviticus, detailed instructions are given for how the priests, Aaron's sons, should approach the sacred objects, warning that they must not come at just any time into the holy place, lest they die. The ark was not to be touched directly. It was designed to be transported using acacia wood poles overlaid with gold, which were inserted into golden rings on its sides, a clear safety measure ensuring that the carriers maintained a safe distance from the main unit. This careful handling protocol strongly suggests that the object possessed an inherent and dangerous energy that required specific, insulated procedures to manage. If we consider the Ark as a potential technological artifact, the most compelling theory is that it functioned as a powerful electrical capacitor. A capacitor is a device that stores electrical energy, and the Ark's construction aligns remarkably well with this principle. Its core design, two conductive surfaces separated by an insulating layer, is the fundamental architecture of a capacitor. The pure gold plates, acting as conductors, were separated by the acacia wood, which served as the dielectric insulator. The arid climate of the Sinai Desert, where the Israelites wandered, would have created perfect conditions for the buildup of significant static electricity. The ark, being carried and vibrating across the dry desert, could have accumulated a substantial charge through the triboelectric effect, the same phenomenon that causes you to get a shock after walking on a carpet. The golden cherubim on the lid, positioned close to one another, could have acted as terminals, and the air gap between their wings might have been the point where a visible electrical arc, interpreted as the presence of the Lord, would periodically manifest. This could explain the cloud that was said to fill the tabernacle and the fire that consumed offerings, phenomena that could be attributed to coronal discharge or electrical arcing. The ark's purported abilities extend beyond simple electrical shocks into the realm of the truly spectacular, aligning with other potential applications of high-energy physics. Its most famous exploit was the collapse of the walls of Jericho. For 6 days, the Israelite army, with the ark at its head, marched around the city, and on the 7th day, after a great shout and the blast of trumpets, the massive fortifications crumbled. While this is presented as a miracle, some researchers have speculated about the possibility of a resonant frequency. If the ark could generate or amplify a specific acoustic or electromagnetic frequency that matched the resonant frequency of Jericho's walls, it could, in theory, have induced vibrations powerful enough to shatter the masonry. This principle of resonant frequency is well understood today. It's why soldiers break step when marching across a bridge, to prevent their rhythmic footfalls from matching the bridge's natural frequency and causing catastrophic failure. The idea that an ancient device could harness such a principle is speculative, but it provides a technological framework for an event otherwise explained solely by divine intervention. This interpretation of the ark as a lost technological marvel forces a profound re-evaluation of other wonders described in ancient texts. The ark is not an isolated case. In the Hindu epic the Mahabharata, there are vivid descriptions of powerful weapons called astras, including the Brahmastra, said to be capable of destroying entire armies and rendering the land barren for years. Descriptions that bear a haunting resemblance to the effects of a nuclear explosion. In the ancient Indian Vamana texts, there are intricate details of flying machines with advanced propulsion systems. Even the Greek myth of Archimedes using a giant mirror to set invading Roman ships on fire can be interpreted as an early, and perhaps successful, experiment with concentrated solar energy. These stories, long dismissed as pure mythology, begin to look different when viewed through the lens of the Ark of the Covenant. They suggest the possibility that our ancestors were not merely fantasizing about power, but were recording, in the language and concepts available to them, encounters with advanced technologies whose origins and operating principles have been lost to the centuries. The Ark stands as the most detailed and persistent blueprint from this lost world, a powerful symbol of the enduring human fascination with energy and a permanent question mark challenging us to reconsider where the boundary between ancient science and ancient faith truly lies. Journey now to the steamy tropical lowlands of the Gulf Coast of Mexico, where the Olmec civilization, often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica, left behind a gallery of giants. Scattered across sites like San Lorenzo, La Venta, and Tres Zapotes are 17 colossal stone heads, each one a stern, silent sentinel gazing out from a forgotten world. Carved from single, massive blocks of basalt, a dense, hard volcanic rock, these heads are monumental portraits of powerful Olmec rulers, each with a unique, individualized face, wearing what appears to be a protective helmet. Their sheer physical presence is overwhelming. The average head stands about 6 feet tall, but the largest, found at the Rancho La Cobata site, towers at nearly 10 feet and is estimated to weigh a staggering 40 tons. To stand before one is to feel the weight of history itself, a palpable force carved in stone, and to be confronted with a logistical puzzle that begins not at the ceremonial plaza, but dozens of miles away in the rugged Tuxtla Mountains. The first act of this engineering drama was the selection and quarrying of the stone itself, a process that reveals a sophisticated geological understanding. The Olmec did not simply use any nearby boulder. All 17 known heads were carved from a specific type of basalt, quarried from the Cerro Sintepec and other peaks in the Tuxtlas. This was a deliberate choice. This particular basalt, formed from ancient lava flows, had a fine-grained texture ideal for detailed carving, yet was incredibly durable, capable of withstanding the elements for millennia. Getting these multi-ton blocks from the mountain quarries to their final homes was the true Herculean task. The distances involved are staggering. San Lorenzo, for instance, lies a full 150 kilometers from the primary quarries. This was not a flat, easy journey. The route would have crossed swamps, dense jungle, and rugged, uneven terrain, all without the aid of the wheel, which had no practical application in this environment without suitable draft animals or any metal tools harder than the stone they were moving. So how did they do it? The most widely accepted theory involves a brilliant combination of water and land transport, a testament to Olmec ingenuity. The journey likely began with immense effort at the quarry. Using stone tools and fire setting, heating the rock with fire, and then rapidly cooling it with water to create fractures, workers would have painstakingly detached a colossal block from the bedrock. From there, the most plausible land-based method for moving such a weight would have been on a wooden sledge, dragged over a prepared roadway of lubricated logs. Imagine teams of hundreds of laborers pulling in unison with strong ropes made from plant fibers, inching the sledge forward as other workers constantly repositioned the log rollers from the back to the front. This method, while effective, is incredibly slow and labor-intensive, a testament to the Olmec's ability to mobilize and coordinate a massive workforce. But the real genius of their logistics likely lay on the water. Researchers believe that once the boulders were dragged to the nearest river, they were loaded onto enormous, specially built rafts. The river networks flowing from the Tuxtla Mountains toward the Olmec heartland would have acted as natural highways, allowing the heavy stones to be floated for the majority of the journey with dramatically reduced effort compared to overland hauling. This theory of a hybrid transport system, a brutal overland trek to the river, followed by a relatively efficient float downstream, explains how these immense weights could have been moved across such vast and challenging distances. Yet, the mystery deepens when we consider the final stage of the journey to a site like San Lorenzo, which itself sits on a plateau elevated 150 feet above the surrounding plains. After the raft arrived at the base of the plateau, how was a 50-ton head lifted up that steep incline? This is where the Olmecs may have employed complex leveraging and ramp systems. While no archaeological evidence of such ramps has been found, the principle is sound. By building a long, gently sloping earthen ramp and using the same combination of sledges, rollers, and human power, they could have slowly, incrementally winched the heads to the summit. The entire process, from quarry to final placement, was a monumental undertaking that would have required not just brute strength, but a highly organized society with skilled engineers, project managers, and a deep, communal commitment to a vision that transcended any single lifetime. These heads were more than art. They were the ultimate symbols of a ruler's power, a physical manifestation of their ability to command the very landscape and the labor of their people. The silent, stoic faces of the Olmec heads are therefore a dual testament to the artistic genius that could capture such striking individuality in unyielding stone, and to the lost engineering marvels of logistics and will that brought these giants to life. Now let's dive from the coastal mysteries of the Olmecs into the depths of the ocean itself, where legend and archaeology converge in a stunning underwater discovery. For thousands of years, Hindu texts like the Mahabharata and the Puranas have spoken of a magnificent mythical city called Dwarka, the glorious capital of the god-hero Krishna. The ancient scriptures describe it as a city of great wealth protected by massive gates with magnificent palaces, broad boulevards, and a bustling port filled with ships from distant lands. They also recount its tragic fate, saying that upon Krishna's departure from the world, the sea rose and consumed the entire city, swallowing its splendors beneath the waves. For centuries, this was considered a powerful allegory, a poetic metaphor for the transient nature of material existence. But what if the story was more than a myth? What if it was a geological memory preserved for millennia? This question began to find a startling answer in the late 1980s and 90s, when marine archaeologists began a systematic exploration of the seafloor off the coast of modern Dwarka in Gujarat, India. What they found there sent shockwaves through the historical community. Lying at depths ranging from 20 to 40 feet below the water's surface, they discovered the remains of a vast submerged settlement. These were not random, scattered stones. They uncovered clear evidence of sophisticated urban planning, the foundations of massive fortification walls that would have once encircled the city, the layout of streets and residential complexes, and the remnants of a grand stone pier or jetty, suggesting a major maritime harbor. The sheer scale of the ruins pointed to a highly organized and advanced society, one with the engineering capability to construct a major coastal metropolis. The most compelling evidence came from the stonework itself. Large, interlocking stone blocks were found, some weighing hundreds of kilograms, showing clear signs of having been precisely shaped and dressed. This was not the work of a primitive fishing village. It was the blueprint of a major urban center, perfectly matching the descriptions found in the ancient epics. The engineering knowledge required to build a city of this scale on a coastline reveals a profound understanding of maritime architecture. The builders constructed a massive stone pier, which would have allowed large vessels to dock and unload goods, facilitating the kind of prosperous trade described in the texts. The presence of sturdy fortification walls suggests they were prepared for both terrestrial and naval threats. But perhaps their most impressive feat was the durability of their construction. The fact that these stone structures have survived thousands of years submerged in salt water, battered by currents and tides, is a testament to the quality of their materials and the soundness of their engineering. They chose and shaped their stone with such skill that the core skeletons of their city have resisted the relentless erosive power of the ocean, preserving a ghostly outline of their achievements on the seafloor. This underwater preservation offers modern archaeologists a unique time capsule blueprint of ancient city planning, one that was not built over by subsequent civilizations but frozen in a moment of catastrophic submergence. The truly paradigm-shifting aspect of this discovery, however, comes from the dating of the artifacts recovered from the site. While the more recent structures date to the second millennium before the Common Era, some of the oldest recovered materials, including pottery shards and building foundations, have been carbon dated to be as old as 9,500 years. If these dates are correct, they fundamentally challenge the conventional timeline of human civilization. Mainstream history tells us that the first urban societies, like those in Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley, began to emerge around 5,000 to 5,500 years ago. The possibility of a major planned city like Dwarka existing over 9,000 years ago suggests a much earlier and previously unknown chapter of urban development. It implies that sophisticated city-building cultures may have flourished at the end of the last ice age, only to be lost when rising sea levels from melting glaciers inundated their coastal homes. This isn't just about one city, it's about rewriting the origins of civilization itself. This leads us to the haunting question of how such a durable city ultimately ended up beneath the waves. The evidence points toward a rapid and catastrophic submergence, aligning powerfully with the ancient legends. Geological studies of the region show clear signs of significant coastal subsidence and a dramatic rise in sea levels around 7,500 years ago. It is entirely plausible that a major seismic event, perhaps a massive earthquake or a series of them, caused the land to sink, allowing the ocean to rush in and claim the city. The very event that destroyed Dwarka is also what preserved it, protecting it from the recycling of building materials and the destruction of later settlements that so often obscures ancient urban sites on land. The sunken city of Dwarka, therefore, stands as more than just an archaeological site. It is a powerful symbol of humanity's long struggle with a changing planet. It represents a lost blueprint for coastal living and a stark reminder of the power of nature to reclaim even our greatest achievements, while simultaneously pointing the way to other potential submerged cities around the world, each holding fragments of our forgotten past. While the sunken city of Dwarka reveals a lost chapter of maritime urban planning, another ancient civilization was solving a very different but equally critical engineering challenge on the sun-baked islands of Malta. Here, etched into the soft limestone bedrock, is a sprawling network of mysterious parallel grooves known as the cart ruts. These are not random scratches on the landscape. They form an intricate, almost bewildering system of tracks that climb steep slopes, cut across plateaus, and in one of their most compelling mysteries, disappear directly beneath the waves of the Mediterranean Sea. Dating back over 4,000 years to a time when the Great Pyramids of Giza were still new, this network represents a monumental and enduring feat of civil engineering. The ruts themselves are typically pairs of channels, carved deep into the stone, running parallel to each other at a consistent gauge or width apart. They vary in depth, with some being shallow impressions and others worn down over a foot deep, suggesting centuries, if not millennia, of relentless use. The sheer scale is what truly astonishes. This isn't a single path but a complex web of intersecting routes, a prehistoric highway system carved not from asphalt, but from the very foundation of the islands themselves. The creation of this network required a sophisticated understanding of route planning and terrain management. The builders weren't just taking the easiest path, they were engineering for efficiency and durability. The ruts often follow the most logical and direct routes between important locations, such as from inland quarries to coastal settlements or from agricultural fields to population centers. In some remarkable instances, they demonstrate advanced solutions to topographic challenges. They carve across steep inclines with a consistent gradient, and at certain junctions, they feature complex switchbacks and passing points, clear evidence of a system designed to manage two-way traffic. The method of their creation is thought to have been surprisingly straightforward yet effective. The most plausible theory is that the initial grooves were cut into the soft limestone, and then, over generations, wooden-wheeled carts, likely pulled by people or small animals, wore the grooves ever deeper. The limestone bedrock, while soft enough to be worked, is also incredibly durable, turning these tracks into a permanent feature of the landscape. This was infrastructure built to last, a testament to a society that thought in terms of permanence and systematic connection. Perhaps the most tantalizing clue to the rut's origin and purpose lies at a place called St. George's Bay, where the tracks run straight off a cliff edge and continue their path underwater, vanishing into the blue depths. This single, powerful image is a geological clock. It tells us unequivocally that this transportation network was created at a time when sea levels were significantly lower, when land now submerged was dry and accessible. This pushes the timeline of this sophisticated engineering back to a period after the last ice age, when melting glaciers were gradually raising ocean levels. The underwater ruts suggest that the network once connected parts of the island that are now separated by water, or perhaps even linked Malta to its neighbor, Gozo, across a land bridge that has long since vanished. This isn't just a system for moving goods within a small island. It's a relic from a different geographical world, a blueprint for a transportation network that serviced a larger, more connected territory that the sea later claimed. The enduring debate, however, centers on what exactly was being transported along these stone highways. The most common and logical theory is that they were used for moving agricultural produce, such as olives and grapes, from the fertile interior to coastal ports for trade. Another strong possibility is that they served the island's vibrant construction industry, transporting massive blocks of limestone from quarries to the sites of the magnificent megalithic temples for which Malta is equally famous. The consistent gauge of the ruts supports the idea of a standardized cart size, suggesting a coordinated, society-wide system, yet other theories propose more specialized functions. Some researchers have suggested they were part of an elaborate irrigation system, though the lack of branching channels makes this less likely. A more intriguing idea is that they were processional pathways, sacred routes walked during religious ceremonies, with the carts used to carry icons or offerings. The truth may be a combination of all these purposes. The cart ruts could have been the multi-purpose infrastructure backbone of their society, facilitating economy, construction, and culture all at once. Their persistence for thousands of years, outlasting the very civilization that created them, shows a level of durable infrastructure planning that many modern road systems would envy, forcing us to wonder what other vast, organized networks from the ancient world have simply faded back into the soil, leaving no trace for us to find. Long before the Great Pyramids pierced the Egyptian sky and millennia before the first stones were set at Stonehenge, a different kind of miracle was taking shape in the heart of what is now Germany. In a quiet field near the town of Goseck, a community of Neolithic farmers began a project that would stand for centuries as a silent testament to their connection with the cosmos. Around 4,900 years before the Common Era, they constructed a simple yet profoundly sophisticated observatory, a series of concentric circular ditches, each one painstakingly dug by hand, topped with wooden palisade walls that reached toward the heavens. This was not a fortress or a village. It was a machine built of earth and timber, designed not to make war or store grain, but to capture the light of the sun itself. At first glance from the ground, it would have appeared as a massive, enclosed sacred space, but to those who understood its design, it was a colossal calendar and a celestial clock, marking the most critical moments of the year with an accuracy that feels almost impossible for its time. The true genius of the Goseck Circle is revealed not in its circular form, but in its carefully placed openings. The enclosure featured a series of gates, and 3 of these were positioned with breathtaking precision. 2 opposing southern gates framed the sunrise and sunset on the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, while a single northern gate marked the summer solstice sunrise. On that one profound morning in deep winter, when the sun seemed to hang lowest in the sky and life itself felt most fragile, the people would have gathered within the circle. As dawn broke, the first rays of the sun would have streamed directly through the southeastern gate, casting a narrow beam of light across the central arena. Over the course of the day, the sun's path would trace a low arc across the southern sky until its final, fading light exited through the southwestern gate. This annual event was more than just a spectacle. It was a cosmic promise. It signaled the turning point, the moment the sun began its long journey back, guaranteeing the return of longer days, warmer weather, and the rebirth of the world around them. This precise alignment was not a lucky guess. It was the product of generations of meticulous observation, a body of knowledge patiently built and carefully passed down through oral tradition. This raises one of the most compelling questions in archaeology. How did a society of early farmers without written language, metal tools, or formal mathematics achieve such a precise understanding of the solar cycle? The answer lies in the power of sustained, collective observation over centuries. These were people whose lives were intimately tied to the rhythms of the earth. Their survival depended on knowing exactly when to plant, when to harvest, and when to prepare for the harsh winter. They were not passive inhabitants of their world, they were active students of it. We can imagine generations of designated sky watchers, perhaps the elders or spiritual leaders of the community, using simple marker posts on the horizon to track the sun's shifting positions. They would have noted how the point of sunrise moved steadily southward as autumn progressed, and how it appeared to pause at its southernmost point for a few days around the solstice before beginning its slow return journey north. This knowledge, accumulated over lifetimes and passed from parent to child, became a sacred science. The Goseck circle was the physical manifestation of that hard-won understanding, a permanent structure that institutionalized their celestial knowledge and made it a central, unifying feature of their culture. The construction of the circle itself was a monumental act of communal faith and engineering. The effort required to dig the ditches and erect the massive timber palisades would have mobilized the entire community for months, if not years. This was not a project undertaken lightly. It speaks to a highly organized society with shared goals and a clear hierarchical structure capable of planning and executing a complex, long-term project. The circle was more than just an observatory. It was a temple, a communal gathering place, and a powerful symbol of cosmic order. Within its enclosed space, the community could participate directly in the cosmic drama, their rituals and ceremonies timed to coincide with these pivotal solar events. This fusion of practical astronomy, agriculture, and spirituality created a cohesive world view where human life was seen as an integral part of a larger, orderly universe. The Goseck Circle is a blueprint for this integrated way of life, demonstrating that the human drive to find meaning in the stars is ancient, powerful, and fundamentally connected to our survival and our spirit. Its discovery forces us to redraw the timeline of human intellectual achievement, proving that the roots of science and engineering are far deeper and more widespread than we ever imagined. Rising from the grounds of the Qut complex in Delhi stands a silent sentinel that has defied one of nature's most relentless forces, the 7-meter iron pillar, a gleaming testament to ancient metallurgical genius that has resisted corrosion for an astonishing 16 centuries. While modern steel structures require constant maintenance and protective coatings to fight rust, this ancient column has withstood monsoon rains, blistering heat, and dramatic temperature shifts while maintaining its remarkable integrity. The pillar's composition reveals an extraordinary understanding of material science that seems almost prophetic. It contains an unusually high phosphorus content and very little sulfur or manganese, creating a unique protective barrier that actively resists the chemical reactions that typically cause iron to deteriorate. This wasn't accidental chemistry. It was a deliberate formulation, a sophisticated recipe developed by Indian metalworkers around 400 CE during the Gupta period, representing a technological peak that wouldn't be matched in Europe until the Industrial Revolution more than 1,000 years later. The manufacturing process itself was a marvel of ancient engineering that combined brute force with delicate precision. Modern analysis using advanced imaging techniques has revealed that the pillar was created through an intricate method of forge welding, where individual pieces of wrought iron were heated and hammered together into a single, cohesive structure. Imagine teams of skilled metalworkers coordinating their efforts, carefully heating iron masses in charcoal-fed furnaces, then skillfully hammering them while monitoring temperature and composition through subtle color changes and spark patterns visible only to experienced eyes. They weren't just pounding metal, they were orchestrating a complex dance of heat, pressure, and timing, gradually building up the massive column through what amounted to an ancient form of additive manufacturing. The real brilliance, however, lies in what they added to the mix. The deliberate inclusion of specific iron ores rich in phosphorus created a passive protective film that forms a continuous, self-repairing shield against moisture and oxygen. This passive layer, primarily consisting of iron hydrogen phosphate hydrate, acts as an invisible guardian, preventing the electrochemical reactions that normally cause rust to spread and penetrate deeper into the metal. What makes this ancient achievement even more remarkable is how it challenges our assumptions about technological progress. For centuries, Western observers who encountered the pillar assumed its preservation must be due to Delhi's dry climate or some lucky accident of composition. It wasn't until the late 20th century that metallurgists began to fully appreciate the sophisticated knowledge embedded within its structure. The ancient Indian metalworkers had essentially developed an early form of what we now call weathering steel, a material that protects itself through controlled surface oxidation, the same principle used in modern architectural landmarks that form a protective rust layer without continuing to corrode. These craftsmen understood principles of materials chemistry that wouldn't be formally documented until the age of modern laboratory science, working with an empirical knowledge gained through generations of careful observation and systematic experimentation with different ores, furnace designs, and working techniques. This extraordinary artifact forces us to confront a profound historical question: how could such advanced metallurgical knowledge emerge, flourish, and then seemingly vanish from common practice? The answer likely lies in the fragile nature of technological transmission in the ancient world. The creation of the iron pillar represents the culmination of centuries of accumulated expertise, knowledge that was probably maintained within specific guilds or family lineages and transmitted through rigorous apprenticeship systems. When social structures were disrupted by political upheaval, economic collapse, or the shifting patterns of trade and warfare, these specialized knowledge systems could easily fragment and disappear. The specific ore sources, the precise furnace temperatures, the exact hammering sequences, all these critical parameters that made the technology work could be lost within a single generation if the master craftsmen failed to pass on their secrets, or if the economic conditions that supported such specialized production changed dramatically. The legacy of the iron pillar extends far beyond its own remarkable preservation, pointing toward a much broader landscape of lost material technologies that ancient civilizations might have developed. Consider the legendary Damascus steel of the Middle East, with its distinctive watery patterns and extraordinary strength, a manufacturing process that was lost by the 18th century and has only been partially reconstructed through modern scientific analysis. Or the remarkable platinum artifacts created by pre-Columbian South American metalworkers, who developed techniques for working with this incredibly high melting point metal centuries before European metallurgists could achieve similar feats. Even the seemingly simple but incredibly durable Roman glass, some examples of which have survived 2,000 years in conditions that would destroy modern equivalents, suggests sophisticated understanding of material properties and manufacturing techniques that we're still working to fully comprehend. Each of these examples represents not just isolated technical tricks, but entire systems of material knowledge complete with their own theoretical frameworks, practical methodologies, and quality control standards that were developed, refined, and then lost to history. As modern materials science increasingly looks to ancient technologies for sustainable solutions, the iron pillar stands as both an inspiration and a cautionary tale. Contemporary researchers are actively studying its protective mechanisms to develop new, more environmentally friendly anti-corrosion treatments that could reduce our reliance on toxic paints and coatings. The pillar's endurance demonstrates the possibility of creating materials that work in harmony with their environment rather than constantly fighting against it, offering valuable lessons for sustainable engineering in an age of environmental concern. Yet it also serves as a powerful reminder of how fragile human knowledge can be, how entire domains of expertise can slip through the cracks of history when the social and economic structures that support them change. This single, rust-resistant column challenges our linear narrative of technological progress, suggesting instead a history filled with peaks of achievement that were reached, maintained for generations, and then lost, waiting to be rediscovered by later civilizations who must then learn the same lessons all over again. Consider the immense challenge facing the great Maya city of Tikal, nestled deep within the rainforests of Guatemala. Here, a bustling urban center supporting tens of thousands of people thrived not along a mighty river but atop a porous limestone ridge. For half the year, torrential rains would drench the city, while the other half brought a severe dry season where surface water could vanish completely. Survival in such a place was not a matter of chance. It was a triumph of hydraulic engineering on a colossal scale. The Maya response to this environmental paradox was to transform their entire city into a massive, intricate water catchment and distribution machine. At the heart of this system were the immense bojos, the low-lying seasonal swamps that surrounded the city. The Maya didn't just see these as obstacles, they recognized them as opportunities. They engineered these areas to become giant, functioning reservoirs by strategically excavating them and lining their bottoms with layers of thick, impermeable clay. This was no simple plastering of mud. They created sophisticated, compacted clay seals that acted as a giant bathtub, preventing the precious rainwater from simply draining away into the thirsty limestone bedrock below. The scale of this earth-moving is almost incomprehensible, representing a communal effort that would have spanned generations, all dedicated to securing the most vital resource of all. The water collected in these vast reservoirs was just the beginning. The real genius of the Maya system lay in its distribution and, most remarkably, its purification. To move water from the central reservoirs to the outlying residential areas and the towering temple precincts, the Maya constructed complex networks of canals, dams, and sluice gates. These were not simple ditches. They were carefully engineered channels with calculated gradients to maintain a consistent flow without causing erosion. But the most astonishing feature has been uncovered at the city of Tikal's Corriental Reservoir. Here, archaeologists found a filtration system that seems ripped from a modern engineering textbook. The reservoir was fed by a spring that passed through a dedicated filtration tank, a man-made chamber filled with a carefully selected blend of crystalline quartz and zeolite. Zeolite is a volcanic mineral with a unique, cage-like crystalline structure that acts as a molecular sieve. It is spectacularly effective at trapping harmful bacteria, toxic heavy metals, and other nitrogen-based compounds that can contaminate water. This is not a simple sand filter. This is a technology that operates on a molecular level. Incredibly, zeolite is used in exactly the same way in modern water filtration plants and even in the life support systems of spacecraft. The fact that the Maya identified this specific mineral, understood its properties, and integrated it into a public water system 2,000 years ago reveals a scientific understanding that borders on the clairvoyant. This sophisticated hydraulic infrastructure was the very bedrock of Maya urban planning. Cities were not laid out arbitrarily. They were designed from the ground up with water management as the central organizing principle. Plazas were not just public spaces, they were carefully graded and paved to act as catchment basins, funneling rainwater through stone-lined conduits into the reservoir system. Even the steep plastered surfaces of their immense temple pyramids, like the famous temple of the Great Jaguar at Tikal, were engineered as active components of this system, their sides designed to channel rainfall directly into designated cisterns. The entire cityscape became a tool for harvesting every possible drop of water. This level of integrated planning speaks to a society with a profound, almost symbiotic relationship with its environment. The Maya engineers weren't fighting nature, they were listening to it and designing their world in harmony with its rhythms. They understood the local hydrology, the geology, and the seasonal cycles with an intimacy that allowed them to create a truly sustainable urban existence in the middle of a challenging rainforest. Their ability to support a large, complex society in such an environment for centuries stands as a powerful counter-narrative to the idea that advanced civilization can only flourish along perpetual rivers. The ultimate testament to the effectiveness of Maya hydraulic engineering is not just in historical texts, but in the enduring landscape itself. Centuries after these cities were abandoned to the jungle, many of their reservoirs, now known as aguadas, still hold water. While modern concrete dams require constant maintenance and have a finite lifespan, these ancient clay-lined reservoirs, maintained by natural processes, have proven their resilience over more than a millennium. They continue to serve as vital water sources for the wildlife and even the local communities that live in the region today. This longevity forces us to ask a difficult question about our own modern approaches. Our water systems, while technologically advanced, are often brittle, reliant on energy-intensive pumps, chemical treatments, and complex infrastructure that can fail. The Maya system was robust, low energy, and integrated directly into the environment. It used natural materials and gravitational flow, creating a solution that was not only effective but inherently sustainable. The silent, water-filled aguadas hidden in the jungle are more than just archaeological features. They are a lasting blueprint for how to live with a delicate ecosystem, demonstrating that the most advanced engineering is sometimes that which works so seamlessly with nature that it becomes virtually eternal. Now, let's turn our attention to one of the world's most iconic ancient structures, where the mystery is not just in the towering sarsen stones, but in the smaller, inner circle of blue stones that hold a secret spanning an incredible distance. The journey of these blue stones is one of the most epic and perplexing logistical stories from the ancient world. While the massive sarsen stones that form the primary structure of Stonehenge were sourced from the Marlborough Downs, a still formidable 20 miles away, the smaller blue stones tell a far more dramatic tale. These stones, weighing up to 4 tons each, were not local. They originated in the rugged, windswept Preseli Hills of Western Wales, a staggering 140 miles away from the Salisbury Plain where Stonehenge stands. Imagine the sheer scale of that undertaking. We are talking about Neolithic people 5,000 years ago, moving dozens of enormous rocks across a landscape of rolling hills, dense forests, and major river valleys, all without the wheel, without draft animals, and without metal tools to ease their path. This was not a simple relocation of a few boulders. It was a prehistoric mega-project of almost unimaginable ambition. For a long time, the how of this journey was the subject of pure speculation and folklore. In recent years, however, archaeological detective work has brought us much closer to the starting point of this epic trek. Through rigorous geological analysis, researchers have pinpointed the exact quarries in the Preseli Hills where these bluestones were extracted around 3,000 years before the Common Era. The two main sites are Carn Godog and Craig Rose Wife Felin, where archaeologists have found not only the distinctive outcrops of spotted dolerite and rhyolite that match the Stonehenge bluestones, but also the material evidence of the quarrying itself. They uncovered stone tools, charcoal from fires used to help fracture the rock, and even a loading bay area where the massive stones were likely prepared for their long journey. This discovery confirms the starting point with scientific certainty, but it only deepens the central mystery. Knowing where they began makes the 140-mile journey that followed seem even more impossible, transforming a geological puzzle into a monumental question of human capability. The debate over the transportation method is one of archaeology's most lively and enduring controversies. The traditional, and perhaps most intuitive, theory is that the builders used a combination of land and water routes. This hypothesis suggests that the stones were first dragged on wooden sledges or rollers down from the Preseli Hills to the Welsh coast. There, they would have been loaded onto rafts or lashed between canoes to be floated along the coastline of Wales, then up the River Avon, and finally transferred back to land for the final overland haul to Salisbury Plain. This theory seems logical, as water transport is far more efficient for moving heavy loads than dragging them across land. However, this route is fraught with its own perils. The seas around the Welsh coast are notoriously treacherous, and navigating heavy, unstable rafts loaded with multi-ton stones would have been an incredibly risky endeavor. Furthermore, the final land journey from the river to Stonehenge itself would still have been a massive undertaking. While this land and water theory is elegant on paper, no direct evidence, such as a sunken stone-laden raft, has ever been found to confirm it. This has led to a compelling and radical alternative theory that challenges our entire perception of the ancient landscape. What if the glaciers did the heavy lifting? Some geologists have proposed that the bluestones were not moved by human hands at all, but were instead transported to the general area of Salisbury Plain by the immense ice sheets of the last ice age. According to this theory, these glaciers, which retreated around 10,000 years before Stonehenge was built, could have carried the Preseli bluestones as glacial erratics, depositing them much closer to the site. The Neolithic builders would then have simply collected these conveniently placed stones from the surrounding countryside. This would certainly explain the incredible distance, as it removes the need for a human-led cross-country trek. However, this theory faces a significant geological hurdle. Detailed studies of the direction of ice flow and the patterns of glacial deposits in southern England suggest that the Preseli Hills were not in the path of any glacier that reached Salisbury Plain. While the ice came close, it likely stopped short, leaving the bluestones in their native Wales, waiting for humans to come and move them. The glacial theory simplifies the how, but creates a new problem with the where, leaving the mystery very much alive. So, if we set aside the glacial theory, we return to the staggering reality of human-powered transport. This forces us to consider the immense social and spiritual dimensions of this endeavor. Why would a Neolithic community commit generations of labor to such a back-breaking task? The answer likely lies not in practical necessity, but in profound spiritual significance. The bluestones were not chosen for their structural properties. The local sarsens were larger and more suitable for the grand trilithons. The bluestones were chosen because they were special. The Preseli Hills were themselves an ancient sacred landscape, dotted with Neolithic monuments and burial chambers. The stone from these hills was believed to hold unique power. It is a spotted dolerite that, when wet or freshly quarried, glistens with embedded crystals of feldspar and quartz, giving it a magical, starlit appearance. It is possible that the stones were not merely building materials, but were considered inherently sacred, perhaps believed to be the dwelling places of ancestors or deities. Transporting them from their sacred source to the new ritual center at Stonehenge may have been a deliberate act of pilgrimage, a way of physically bringing the power of the Welsh Holy Land to the heart of Wessex. The journey itself, with its immense difficulty, may have been a form of worship, a ritual of endurance that consecrated the stones through their epic voyage. This perspective transforms Stonehenge from a simple astronomical calendar into a symbolic landscape of immense cultural power. The blue stones in this view are the key. They represent a spiritual geography made manifest, a physical connection between the power center of the Preseli Hills and the new gathering place on Salisbury Plain. The effort required to move them was not a wasteful expenditure of energy, but a necessary investment that gave the stones and the finished monument their ultimate meaning. The very difficulty of the journey validated the spiritual importance of the project. It required the coordination of multiple communities across a vast territory, suggesting that Stonehenge was not the project of a single isolated tribe, but a unifying focal point for a wide network of Neolithic peoples who shared a common belief system. The successful transport of the blue stones would have been a legendary achievement, a story told and retold for generations, reinforcing the social bonds and shared identity of everyone involved. The stones, therefore, are more than just rocks. They are the crystallized evidence of a sophisticated society with a complex spiritual worldview and the astonishing organizational will to bring that worldview to life, no matter the distance or the difficulty. Buried in silent, subterranean formation for over 2 millennia, the terracotta army guarding the tomb of China's first emperor presents a paradox on a colossal scale. On one hand, it is a breathtaking gallery of individuality, where no two faces among the thousands of soldiers, archers, and cavalrymen are exactly alike, each bearing the distinct imprint of a specific artisan's hand. Yet, on the other hand, this entire force of over 8,000 figures was manufactured with the systematic efficiency of a modern factory, a production miracle that unfolded more than 2,000 years before Henry Ford's assembly lines revolutionized industry. This was not a haphazard project of artistic passion. It was the result of a meticulously planned, state-controlled manufacturing blueprint that perfectly embodied the philosophy of its mastermind, Emperor Qin Shi Huang, a belief in standardization, centralized control, and overwhelming scale as the foundations of power. The secret to this incredible feat lay in a revolutionary system of modular construction and interchangeable parts. The craftsmen of the Qin dynasty did not sculpt each warrior from head to toe as a single, solid piece of clay. Instead, they broke the human form down into a series of standardized components. The torsos, arms, legs, and heads were all produced separately in different workshops, following strict government-issued templates. Imagine a production line where one group of artisans specialized in crafting hollow torso modules, while another focused on manufacturing a repertoire of leg types, some standing at attention, others bent in a walking pose. The arms were created in various positions for holding different weapons, and even the hands were molded separately and then attached. This modular approach meant that the workshops could operate with incredible efficiency, stockpiling an inventory of ready-made parts. To assemble a soldier, workers would simply select the appropriate components and join them together with soft clay strips, a process that dramatically accelerated production while maintaining a consistent overall quality and style across the entire army. This system of standardization, however, was ingeniously balanced with deliberate artistic variation to prevent the army from becoming a monotonous sea of identical figures. While the bodies were assembled from standardized parts, the heads were the primary canvas for individual expression. Artisans created a range of basic head shapes and a variety of pre-molded facial features, different types of eyes, eyebrows, noses, lips, and ears. These features were then combined and, most importantly, hand-finished. Before the clay hardened, a master sculptor would take each head and use simple tools to refine the features, adding lines around the eyes, adjusting the set of a mouth, or tweaking the shape of a beard. This final touch transformed a standardized component into a unique portrait, imbuing the army with a startling sense of humanity and diversity. This brilliant combination of mass production and custom finishing allowed the kin manufacturers to achieve both their goals, creating an army of overwhelming, uniform scale that was simultaneously populated by individuals, reflecting the very real diversity of the emperor's actual military forces. The entire operation was a masterpiece of administrative organization and quality control, a testament to the Qin dynasty's obsession with order and accountability. The production was decentralized across a network of state-sponsored workshops, each likely competing to meet quotas and quality standards. Crucially, the ancient managers implemented a strict traceability system. Nearly every figure in the terracotta army bears a seal or an inscription, often hidden on the back of the armor or in a discreet fold of the tunic. These marks are the signatures of the master craftsman or the workshop foreman responsible for that particular piece. Some inscriptions even detail the name of the workshop and the specific artisan, creating a clear chain of responsibility. This was the ancient equivalent of a serial number, a quality assurance measure that ensured every component could be traced back to its source. If a leg broke or a head was malformed, the officials knew exactly which workshop was at fault. This system of enforced accountability drove the high standards evident in the finished army and reveals a sophisticated understanding of industrial management that we typically associate with the modern era. The sheer logistical scope of this project remains almost unimaginable. Current estimates suggest the construction of the entire mausoleum complex, including the army, required 700,000 workers laboring for nearly 40 years. The workshops had to manage an immense supply chain, sourcing vast quantities of local clay, fuels for the kilns, and minerals for the pigments that once painted the figures in vibrant, lifelike colors. The firing process itself was a monumental challenge. Each terracotta warrior, weighing several hundred pounds, had to be fired in massive, wood-burning kilns at temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. Controlling the heat and atmosphere in these kilns to prevent the thick clay sections from cracking or exploding required exceptional skill and experience. The successful firing of 8,000 such figures with a remarkably low failure rate points to a deeply embedded, systematic knowledge of ceramic engineering and thermal dynamics that was unparalleled in the ancient world. This incredible manufacturing blueprint, lost for centuries after the fall of the Qin dynasty, forces us to radically reconsider the industrial capabilities of the ancient world. We often envision ancient production as the work of individual artisans toiling in isolation. The terracotta army shatters that image, revealing a society that had mastered the principles of assembly line production, parts standardization, quality control, and large-scale project management. It stands as a powerful clay and bronze testament to the fact that the organizational genius we credit to the Industrial Revolution was not a sudden invention, but a principle that had been discovered, applied on a staggering scale, and then tragically forgotten. The silent, assembled ranks of the Emperor's Guard are therefore more than a funerary art display. They are the physical manifestation of a lost system of mass production, a permanent reminder that the ancient world contained pockets of administrative and engineering sophistication that rival, and in some ways prefigure, our own modern industrial age. Isolated by thousands of miles of open ocean, the small, triangular island known to the world as Easter Island was one of the most remote places ever settled by humankind. It is a place famous for its silent, giant stone faces, the Moai, which stand as eternal guardians of a complex and often tragic history. Yet, alongside these monumental sculptures, the Rapa Nui people created another, far more delicate and equally enigmatic treasure, a series of wooden tablets covered in intricate, tiny glyphs, a script known as Rongo Rongo. Discovered in the 19th century, these artifacts represent the only known indigenous writing system to develop in the entire expanse of Oceania, a vast region of islands scattered across the Pacific. The existence of a fully formed script in such extreme isolation is a historical marvel in itself, a flicker of intellectual brilliance that seems to defy the odds. The glyphs are beautiful and complex, featuring stylized human forms, animals like birds and fish, geometric shapes, and abstract symbols, all carved in alternating directions using a system called reverse Boustrophedon. This means the reader would follow one line from left to right, then turn the tablet upside down to read the next line, again from left to right, creating a continuous, snaking path of information. With hundreds of distinct characters, Rongo Rongo does not appear to be a simple mnemonic aid or a set of pictograms. Its structure suggests a true, sophisticated writing system, capable of recording complex thoughts, stories, and perhaps most tantalizingly, detailed knowledge. The tragedy of Rongo Rongo is that by the time European missionaries and explorers took note of the tablets in the 1860s, the key to understanding them had already been lost. The social fabric of Rapa Nui had been devastated by slave raids, introduced diseases, and civil strife, and the last of the learned men who could read the sacred script, known as Tangata Rongo Rongo, had perished, taking their knowledge with them. What remains are just 26 known authentic tablets and a handful of other inscribed objects, a pitifully small corpus for any modern codebreaker to work with. Over the decades, countless attempts have been made to decipher the script, employing everything from traditional linguistic analysis to advanced computer algorithms. Some researchers have tried to link it to the island's unique kinship systems or its complex oral traditions. Others have looked for patterns that might correlate with lunar calendars or genealogical records of chiefs. A few have even proposed that the script is not a true writing system at all, but a form of proto-writing used as a memory aid for reciting rituals or chants. Despite these efforts, no one has yet produced a consistent, verifiable translation. The script guards its secrets with an almost perfect silence, resisting every cipher and key applied to it, much like the more famous Voynich Manuscript. The potential knowledge locked within these undeciphered texts is what fuels the enduring fascination. If the tablets could speak, what would they tell us? Given the Rapa Nui people's incredible achievement in navigating the vast Pacific to find their island home, it is deeply compelling to imagine that the tablets contain sophisticated navigational blueprints. They might detail star charts for long voyaging canoes, maps of ocean currents, or instructions for reading subtle swells and bird flight patterns, the very knowledge that allowed Polynesians to conquer the greatest ocean on Earth. Alternatively, the texts could be a vital repository of agricultural and ecological wisdom. Easter Island's history is a cautionary tale of environmental change, and the Rongo Rongo tablets might hold records of sustainable farming techniques, soil preservation methods, or the management of the island's once plentiful palm forests. They could be manuals for survival, written by a people who understood their fragile ecosystem in a way we are only now, with our modern science, beginning to grasp. They might even contain the true history of the island's settlement and the cultural significance of the Moai, directly from the people who built them, free from the interpretations and misunderstandings of later outsiders. The very fact that Rongorongo developed at all on this tiny, remote island is a profound statement about human ingenuity. It suggests that the drive to record information in a permanent, complex form is a universal human impulse, one that can emerge independently in the most unlikely of places. This was not a technology borrowed from European visitors. Contact with the outside world actually led to its destruction. Rongorongo was an indigenous invention, a homegrown intellectual revolution that blossomed in total isolation. Its existence challenges the old-fashioned, linear models of cultural evolution, proving that complexity and sophistication can arise anywhere human creativity takes root. This linguistic puzzle, therefore, is more than just an academic curiosity. It is a locked door to an entire world of thought, a library of a unique culture's greatest achievements and hardest-won lessons. The silent glyphs are a permanent, haunting reminder of how much knowledge can be lost in a single generation, and how the recovery of even a single key could open a window onto a lost Pacific wisdom, offering insights not just into the past, but potentially into our own relationship with fragile island environments. But if the terracotta army represents the pinnacle of a known, centralized state, our next discovery comes from a time so remote it shatters the very foundations of what we thought we knew about human society. Nestled on a windswept hilltop in southeastern Turkey, a site known as Göbekli Tepe presents a mystery that forces us to rewrite the first chapter of civilization itself. Imagine a series of vast circular enclosures, their boundaries marked by enormous T-shaped limestone pillars. Each pillar is a monolith hewn from the living rock, with some towering 16 feet high and weighing in at over 10 tons. These are not rough, primitive stones. They are masterfully shaped, their surfaces smoothed and decorated with an elaborate bestiary of carved relief snakes, foxes, scorpions, wild boars, and soaring birds, all rendered with a stunning artistic sensibility. The sheer scale and precision of the work is astonishing enough, but the true shock comes from the radiocarbon dates. This complex was actively built and used around 9,600 years before the Common Era. That means it was already ancient when the first stone was laid at Stonehenge, a staggering 6,000 years earlier. Göbekli Tepe is not just old, it is a monumental anomaly, a grand, sophisticated structure from a world we assumed was populated only by small, nomadic bands of hunter-gatherers. This timeline is what turns conventional history completely on its head. For over a century, the accepted narrative of human progress has followed a simple, logical sequence. First, humans learned to farm during the Neolithic Revolution. Agriculture produced a food surplus, which allowed people to settle down in permanent villages. This settled life, in turn, led to population growth, social stratification, and the specialization of labor. Only then, according to the theory, did humans have the time, resources, and organized workforce necessary to embark on massive construction projects like temples and monuments. Göbekli Tepe brutally inverts this sequence. Here we have the world's first known megalithic complex, a project that would have required a large, coordinated labor force and highly skilled artisans, and it was built before the widespread adoption of agriculture. The evidence from the site shows that the people who built it were still primarily hunters and foragers. They had not yet domesticated wheat or animals on a large scale. This means that organized religion, or at least a shared, complex symbolic system, may not be a product of settled civilization, but rather its cause. It suggests that the human urge to come together for a grand spiritual purpose might be what first spurred us to invent the technologies of society, to settle down, to organize, and to build. The engineering knowledge required to execute this vision reveals a prehistoric society with capabilities we have severely underestimated. The entire complex was a feat of sophisticated quarrying and logistics. The limestone pillars were cut from local bedrock quarries located just a few hundred meters from the hilltop. Using only stone tools, flint pickaxes, and chisels, workers had to detach these colossal blocks from the solid rock. The process likely involved a technique of pecking and grinding, and possibly using water to expand cracks in the stone. Once free, the multi-ton pillars had to be transported up the hill and then erected into their precise positions. How did they do this without wheels, without draft animals, and without metal tools? The most plausible theory involves a combination of manpower, leverage, and earthen ramps. Hundreds of people would have been needed to drag each pillar on wooden sledges or rollers, pulling with ropes made from plant fibers. To stand them upright, they probably dug a pit, maneuvered the base into it, and then used a system of ropes and levers, perhaps with the aid of a temporary ramp, to slowly raise the pillar into its vertical position. This was not a random act of piling stones. It was a carefully planned and executed operation that required a deep, communal understanding of physics, geometry, and project management. The purpose of Göbekli Tepe only deepens the mystery. The enclosures were not used as dwellings. There is no evidence of daily domestic life like hearths or trash pits. Instead, they appear to have been exclusively ritual or ceremonial spaces. After being used for centuries, each stone circle was deliberately and meticulously buried under vast amounts of earth and stone fill, a conscious act of interment that preserved the structures perfectly for millennia. This intentional burial suggests the site held an immense, sacred significance. The carved animals, far from being mere decoration, were likely powerful spiritual symbols, perhaps representing clan totems or deities in a complex belief system. Göbekli Tepe was a pilgrimage center, a sacred mountain sanctuary where scattered bands of hunter-gatherers would periodically gather from across the region. These gatherings would have been crucial for exchanging information, finding marriage partners, forging alliances, and participating in shared rituals. The need to build and maintain this central, sacred place may have been the very engine that drove these societies toward greater organization, cooperation, and ultimately, the experiments with plant cultivation that would lead to the agricultural revolution. The temple, in a very real sense, may have built the farm. This single site forces us to see our prehistoric ancestors not as simple survivors, but as visionary architects of their own world, capable of conceiving and constructing monuments that would stand as a testament to their collective spirit for over 11,000 years, challenging us to reconsider where the true roots of civilization truly lie. The discovery of the Antikythera Mechanism was so revolutionary because it stood alone for so long, a single, inexplicable data point in the history of technology. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if this intricate bronze device wasn't a miraculous one-off, but merely the one that survived the sole representative of an entire lineage of sophisticated mechanical computers that flourished in the ancient Greek world? When we shift our perspective this way, the Antikythera Mechanism transforms from a stunning anomaly into a surviving piece of a much larger and far more tragic puzzle. Historical accounts, scattered like fragments of a shattered mirror, offer us tantalizing glimpses of this lost tradition. The great inventor Archimedes of Syracuse, for instance, was said to have built a sophisticated orrery, a mechanical model of the heavens, that was so precise it could demonstrate the motions of the sun, the moon, and the 5 known planets, and even predict solar and lunar eclipses. The Roman writer Cicero, writing centuries later, described this device with awe, noting that when it was brought to Rome as war booty, the general Marcellus kept it as a prized personal treasure. This was not a child's toy. It was a working scientific instrument of immense complexity, built by the greatest mathematical mind of the ancient world. The references do not stop with Archimedes. Other ancient sources mention similar contraptions. Posidonius, a philosopher and astronomer, is credited with building another planetary display. And even before the Golden Age of Athens, there are hints of such devices. The legend of Tolos, a giant bronze automaton who guarded the shores of Crete, might be a mythological echo of a culture already fascinated with the idea of creating artificial life and complex machinery. These scattered reports, when taken together, begin to form a coherent picture. They suggest that the knowledge required to build the Antikythera Mechanism, the understanding of gear trains, differential systems, and astronomical cycles, was not the secret of a single workshop. It was a specialized field of study, a technological tradition cultivated by a network of philosophers, mathematicians, and master craftsmen. This was a systematic body of knowledge, a lost blueprint for analog computation that seamlessly wove together the theoretical brilliance of Greek geometry with the practical genius of its metalworkers. These devices were the physical manifestation of their cosmology, turning abstract mathematical models into ticking, turning, tangible reality. Consider for a moment the intellectual environment that made such inventions possible. This was a culture that had produced Euclid's geometry, Aristarchus's heliocentric theory, and Eratosthenes' remarkably accurate calculation of the Earth's circumference. They understood the principles of leverage, buoyancy, and the screw. They were not just abstract thinkers, they were relentless tinkerers and engineers. The steam engine, known as the Aeolipile, was described by Hero of Alexandria, demonstrating that the Greeks were actively experimenting with power sources beyond human muscle. Within this vibrant culture of innovation, the development of geared mechanisms for modeling the cosmos was a natural, almost inevitable progression. The Antikythera Mechanism, with its 30-plus meshed bronze gears, represents the apex of this tradition, but it almost certainly wasn't the only application. What other problems might they have turned their mechanical genius toward? Could there have been devices for calculating land areas for taxation, or for solving complex logistical problems for the state? Perhaps there were even early attempts at automated musical instruments or theatrical special effects driven by intricate clockwork, pushing the boundaries of art and entertainment in ways we can only imagine. The capabilities of these lost machines were so advanced that they effectively vanished from the European world for over 1,000 years. The intricate knowledge of precision gearing, the metallurgical formulas for crafting durable bronze alloys, the mathematical principles for designing complex gear ratios, all of it seems to have dissipated into the air. The technologies that the Antikythera Mechanism demonstrates would not be seen again until the great cathedral clocks of the medieval period began to mark the hours, and even those were crude by comparison. The true revival of such sophisticated planetary computers wouldn't occur until the European Renaissance, with figures like Giovanni da Dondi building his astrarium in the 14th century. This staggering 1,400-year gap in the technological record is one of history's most profound silences. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about the fragility of knowledge. A tradition that took centuries to build, passed from master to apprentice in the libraries and workshops of Alexandria, Syracuse, and Rhodes, could be extinguished in a surprisingly short time by war, social collapse, and the disintegration of the economic and political structures that supported such specialized learning. The final, haunting question is not just what was lost, but how much. The burning of the Library of Alexandria is the most famous symbol of this destruction, but the loss was likely more gradual, a death by 1,000 cuts. As the Roman Empire fractured and the Western world entered what were once called the Dark Ages, the demand for such exquisite scientific instruments evaporated. The patrons who funded them were gone, the trade routes that supplied special materials were severed, and the schools that taught the necessary mathematics and astronomy were closed. The master craftsmen died without passing on their secrets, and the scrolls that contained the designs rotted away or were recycled as scrap parchment. The Antikythera Mechanism, then, is not just a wonder in its own right. It is a ghost haunting the corridors of history, a solid piece of evidence pointing to a road not taken. It suggests a world where the scientific revolution might have begun not in the 1600s, but in the 200s before the Common Era. The existence of this broader tradition of ancient precision engineering challenges our most fundamental assumptions about the pace of human progress, revealing that our journey has not been a steady, upward climb, but a path marked by brilliant peaks of achievement that were reached, admired, and then tragically abandoned, leaving behind only rusted gears and cryptic references as clues to greatness that once was. Our journey through these 31 lost blueprints reveals a startling and humbling truth. Ancient civilizations possessed engineering and scientific knowledge that, in some cases, not only rivaled but in specific applications actually surpassed our own modern understanding for centuries, and in some instances for millennia. We have walked through a gallery of ghost technologies, from the self-healing concrete of the Romans that strengthens with time to the precision astronomy of the Greeks encoded in bronze gears, from the mass production systems of the Qin dynasty that predated the Industrial Revolution by 2,000 years to the rust-resistant metallurgy of the Iron Pillar of Delhi. These are not merely isolated curiosities or lucky accidents. They are the scattered pieces of a much larger picture, one that fundamentally challenges our most deeply held assumptions about linear historical progress. We often envision human history as a steady, upward climb from primitive simplicity to modern complexity, but these artifacts tell a different story, a story of peaks and valleys, of brilliant summits of achievement reached and then lost, of knowledge gained and then forgotten in the long, slow turning of the ages. Each of these blueprints represents far more than a mere technical achievement. They embody entirely different ways of seeing the world and solving its problems. The Incas did not try to build rigid, unyielding structures to resist earthquakes. They built flexible, dancing walls that moved with the seismic energy. The Maya did not fight their water-scarce environment with energy-intensive pumps. They integrated their entire city into a symbiotic, gravitational water catchment and purification system. These are approaches to engineering that modern science, with its focus on dominance and control, is only now beginning to humbly rediscover and appreciate. As we face our own era of profound global challenges, from climate change and resource scarcity to the search for sustainable materials and resilient infrastructure, perhaps the greatest value of studying these lost marvels lies not in the specific techniques themselves, but in the alternative perspectives they offer. They show us that there are multiple paths to innovation, that solutions can be found in harmony with nature rather than in opposition to it, and that the wisdom of the past holds a vast, largely untapped reservoir of inspiration. The past is not a dead, static place to be studied from a distance. It is a living library of human ingenuity, and it may very well hold the conceptual keys to our future that we have yet to fully appreciate or even recognize. We would love to hear which of these ancient mysteries most captured your imagination and made you see history in a new light. Was it the cosmic calculator from the depths of the Mediterranean, the self-repairing harbors of the Romans, or the walking giants of Easter Island? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey into the hidden engineering of forgotten civilizations, consider subscribing for more explorations into the greatest enigmas of our shared human story. This legacy of forgotten engineering genius presents us with a profound and urgent question for our modern world. As we face unprecedented challenges in sustainability, resource scarcity, and climate resilience, could the solutions lie not in inventing ever more complex technologies, but in rediscovering principles our ancestors mastered millennia ago? The evidence we have explored suggests a compelling possibility that the most forward-thinking engineering might actually involve looking backward, learning from civilizations that achieved remarkable feats by working in concert with natural systems rather than attempting to dominate them. Consider the fundamental difference in philosophy. Much of modern engineering operates on a principle of conquest. We pour concrete to tame rivers, manufacture chemicals to sterilize soil, and burn fossil fuels to overpower environmental limitations. These approaches often create brittle systems that require constant inputs of energy and maintenance, and they frequently generate unintended consequences that then demand further technological fixes. The ancient approach, by contrast, frequently embodied a philosophy of symbiosis. The self-healing Roman concrete didn't fight seawater. It used seawater as a key ingredient in its ongoing strengthening process. The Inca walls didn't rigidly resist earthquakes. They were designed to dance with the seismic energy, absorbing and dissipating it through flexible stone joints. The Maya water managers didn't rely on energy-intensive pumps. They designed their entire cityscape to function as a gravitational catchment and purification system, harnessing the natural landscape itself as infrastructure. This represents a fundamentally different relationship with the material world, one based on observation, adaptation, and intelligent cooperation with the forces of nature. The concept of longevity, so brilliantly demonstrated by these ancient marvels, offers a powerful corrective to our modern obsession with short-term efficiency and planned obsolescence. We construct buildings with a 50-year lifespan and infrastructure that requires constant, expensive repairs. The Romans, however, built harbors that have survived 2,000 years of Mediterranean storms, and the Pantheon's dome still stands as the world's largest unreinforced concrete structure after nearly 2 millennia. Their success wasn't just in a secret recipe, it was in a design philosophy that prioritized permanence and durability over quick, cheap construction. This long-term perspective is precisely what we need as we confront the need for sustainable development. Imagine applying a Roman concrete mindset to our contemporary infrastructure crisis. Instead of patching crumbling bridges and overpasses every few decades, we could be investing in self-healing materials and construction techniques that grow stronger with time, dramatically reducing both long-term costs and environmental impact from continuous repair and replacement. The initial investment might be higher, but the life cycle cost, both financial and ecological, would be vastly lower. This shift from a disposable to a durable paradigm is not just an engineering challenge. It is a cultural and economic one, requiring us to redefine what we consider efficient to include endurance and resilience. Perhaps the most transformative lesson from these lost blueprints lies in the realm of appropriate technology, the idea that the best solution is often the simplest, most locally adapted, and most energy-efficient one. The massive stone spheres of Costa Rica were moved and shaped with nothing more than human ingenuity, leverage, and an intimate understanding of local materials. The Nazca Lines were created using basic surveying principles scaled up with breathtaking ambition, yet requiring no complex machinery. These achievements remind us that technological sophistication does not always equate to complexity. In an era of over-engineered solutions, we are witnessing a growing movement toward frugal innovation and design for resilience that echoes this ancient wisdom. Modern engineers are now looking at passive cooling systems inspired by termite mounds, which maintain a constant internal temperature without any energy input, and water collection methods modeled on the Namib Desert beetle's ability to harvest fog. These biomimetic approaches are a direct parallel to the ancient practice of closely observing and emulating natural systems. The earthquake-resistant design of Inca masonry, which allowed walls to move and settle back into place, is now inspiring research into modern seismic dampers and base isolation systems that use similar principles of controlled flexibility rather than brute strength. This is not a call to abandon modern technology and return to some mythical pastoral past. That would be both impossible and undesirable. Rather, it is an invitation to create a new synthesis, a fusion of our most advanced computational power, material science, and analytical capabilities with the timeless wisdom of durable, adaptive, and ecologically integrated design. We have the tools to understand, at a molecular level, why Roman concrete self-heals. We can use computer modeling to optimize the interlocking patterns of seismic-resistant masonry. We can deploy satellite monitoring to manage water resources with the same holistic understanding that the Maya applied to their urban centers. The real opportunity is to use our modern knowledge not to replace these ancient principles, but to fully comprehend and systematically apply them on a global scale. This hybrid approach could unlock a new era of sustainable engineering, where smart grids are managed with the foresight of Maya hydrologists, where cities are built with the longevity of Roman harbors, and where our buildings are as resilient to natural forces as Inca fortresses. The legacy of this lost knowledge is not merely a collection of interesting historical footnotes. It is a living library of proven solutions to problems we are still struggling to solve. By embracing this rich heritage, we can forge a future that is not only technologically advanced, but also enduring, resilient, and deeply harmonious with the planet we call home. And so, while we have uncovered these 31 remarkable blueprints, the story is far from over. In many ways, the most thrilling chapters are still being written, not with shovels and trowels in hand, but with satellites, lasers, and autonomous submarines. The greatest discoveries are no longer just beneath our feet. They are hidden under dense jungle canopies, buried in vast, unexcavated tells in the Middle East, and resting in the silent darkness of the deep ocean. For every known archaeological site, there are countless others waiting to be found, and the tools we now have to find them are transforming the field from a slow, methodical science into a dynamic, high-tech treasure hunt. The real frontier of discovery has expanded exponentially, and it promises to reveal lost engineering marvels that could dwarf even our most astonishing finds to date. Consider the power of LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. This technology involves flying a plane or drone over a landscape and firing millions of laser pulses at the ground. By measuring the time it takes for each pulse to bounce back, it can create a fantastically detailed, three-dimensional map of the terrain, effectively digitally stripping away the vegetation that has concealed human activity for centuries. The results have been nothing short of revolutionary. In the jungles of Central America, LiDAR has recently revealed a sprawling, previously unknown Mayan megalopolis in Guatemala. What was thought to be a landscape of scattered, isolated cities has been revealed as a vast, interconnected network of roads, farms, fortifications, and water management systems that supported millions more people than anyone ever believed possible. This single discovery has forced a complete rewrite of the scale and sophistication of Mayan civilization. Similarly, in the dense Cambodian jungles surrounding Angkor Wat, LiDAR has unveiled entire cities from the Khmer Empire, complete with intricate urban grids and hydraulic engineering that rival modern systems. These are not just new sites, they are entire lost civilizations emerging from the shadows, their engineering blueprints suddenly visible for the first time in 1,000 years, all without moving a single grain of soil. Beneath the waves, another frontier is opening up with equally breathtaking potential. The ancient coastlines of our world looked vastly different thousands of years ago, when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower during the last ice age. Where today there is only open ocean, there were once vast, fertile plains, river valleys, and coastal settlements, the very places where early humans would have naturally built their communities. As the glaciers melted, these lands were swallowed by the rising seas, potentially preserving a fossilized record of human habitation in the cold, dark, anaerobic conditions of the seabed. The search for these sunken landscapes, often called Doggerland in the North Sea or the Sahul Shelf off Australia, is one of archaeology's most exciting new fields. Using advanced sonar and sub-bottom profilers, marine archaeologists are now mapping these drowned worlds, finding the ghostly outlines of ancient river channels, lakes, and even potential human-made structures. The discovery of a site like Dwarka proves that such submerged cities are not mere legend. Who knows what other coastal trading hubs, early ports, or even entire cultures lie preserved in the silts and sands of the continental shelf, holding blueprints for maritime engineering and adaptation to climate change that are profoundly relevant to our own time. Beyond the jungles and the oceans, even the most arid and remote deserts are yielding their secrets to new eyes in the sky. Satellite archaeology, or remote sensing, uses multispectral and hyperspectral imaging to detect subtle differences in soil composition and plant health that are invisible to the human eye. A buried stone wall will affect how much moisture the soil above it retains, which in turn affects the growth of the plants above it. From space, these patterns can form the faint but unmistakable outlines of a forgotten fortress, a tomb, or an entire settlement. This technology is allowing researchers to scan thousands of square miles of inaccessible terrain, from the Sahara to the Gobi Desert, identifying promising targets for ground exploration with unprecedented efficiency. These tools are not replacing the traditional archaeologist, they are empowering them, acting as a guide to focus precious time and resources on the most likely places where the next great discovery awaits. It's a powerful collaboration between the macro view of orbit and the micro view of the excavation trench, a partnership that is systematically shrinking the unknown on our planet. This evolving process of discovery offers a profound sense of hope. The fact that we are still finding cities and rewriting history books in the 21st century tells us that our understanding of the past is not a closed book, but a living, breathing narrative that is constantly being updated. Every time a new technology is developed, be it ground-penetrating radar that can see through stone, or DNA analysis that can trace ancient migrations, it is like turning on a new set of lights in a vast, dark library. Shelves and corridors we never knew existed suddenly become visible, filled with stories waiting to be read. The search for these lost blueprints is more than an academic exercise. It is a fundamental human drive to understand our own journey, to recover the wisdom of our collective ancestors, and to piece together the full, magnificent story of human ingenuity. The greatest engineering marvel may not be any single device or structure we have yet discussed, but the relentless, ever-advancing human curiosity that ensures the search itself will never truly